What's up, everybody, man? Back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing episode 39 of Godzilla-Thon. I cannot believe we're on episode 39. Dang, we are so close to 40, although there's only 36 Godzilla films up to this point, Godzilla vs. Kong. And today we are jumping on into 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong, the original end of phase 1 of the MonsterVerse. Actually, in many ways, this is kind of where the MonsterVerse was supposed to originally end, but yeah, this is where the first arc of the MonsterVerse came to a conclusion. Starting in 2014, we got Godzilla 2014, Godzilla King of the Monsters, we also had Kong Skull Island, and it all built up to this, Godzilla vs. Kong, the epic showdown. It was 59 years in the making. This was 59 years after King Kong vs. Godzilla in 1962. We were so close to the 60th anniversary. I honestly, I wouldn't have minded waiting another year until the 60th anniversary of King Kong vs. Godzilla to get this movie, but I think that this movie's release date was very important for this film and for the way I felt about it and for the way a lot of people felt about it. And so I think it did work out for, you know, the way it worked out the way it needed to for this movie, I would say. Godzilla vs. Kong was actually the only Godzilla film released day and date, which means it was both in theaters and on HBO Max at the exact same time, coming out on March 31st, 2021 after years of delays. Of course, this movie was supposed to come out in 2020, actually pretty early in 2020, and then delay after delay after delay caused by, in some cases, just the studio being a little slower on this movie than they were expecting, and in many other cases, the global pandemic, very obviously. That was a pretty brutal situation, and that pushed this movie back quite a lot. This was also the first major blockbuster movie to come out in theaters since the start of the global pandemic in 2020, which was pretty cool. Of course, there was other movies like, you know, Wonder Woman 84, I think was the first to really lead the charge, releasing on HBO Max for Christmas in 2020, and then Tenet came out. I can't remember when Tenet came out. That actually came out in theaters, and that one actually did not do very well. It's not, first of all, it wasn't the major blockbuster type movie that Godzilla vs. Kong was. Obviously, it wasn't a major IP driven film, but also it just didn't do very well because at that point theaters were not quite yet ready to open again. So yeah, Godzilla vs. Kong in many ways is the movie that opened cinemas, and is also the movie that holds the special honor of opening the Grauman's Chinese theater back up after the pandemic. First film to premiere at the Chinese theater since the pandemic, which is pretty special. Obviously, like, that theater has a very long legacy in Hollywood, but beyond that, it's got a very special history in the making of Godzilla, because the Grauman's Chinese theater is where Ray Harryhausen first saw King Kong way back in the day. I believe back in the 1933 showing. He was blown away by it. Ray Harryhausen spent the next couple decades learning how to make stop motion special effects, and then in the 1950s, of course, in 1953, Ray Harryhausen helped make Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, a movie which was beloved by some Toho staff, including producer Tomiyuki Tanaka, who wanted to make a movie very similar to that, leading to Godzilla. So it all comes full circle in a very cool way. I will say preemptively, like, before I fully get into things here, this might be a little unorganized in that I feel like it's going to be easier for me to explain some of the major issues I have with GVK before really getting into the beat by beat. And that's because in two cases, in the first case, a lot of the issues I have with it all boil down to the writing of the movie. Sometimes I feel like I'm going a little crazy whenever I bring up that I don't think that GVK or GXK are particularly the most well-written movies, which has, you know, you could level similar complaints against other Godzilla movies, I'm sure, but I particularly think that there's flaws in them that are noticeable more so here because of the long-term storytelling that the MonsterVerse is supposed to be committed to. And sometimes I feel like I'm just out of my mind because sometimes it feels like I'm the only one who notices these things, or at least that I'm the only one who cares. But it'd also be easier because in many instances, my issue with Godzilla vs. Kong is missed potential. And it would be easier for me to explain the missed potential of the movie, both up top and at the end, because I actually like the movie we got. I'm very happy with Godzilla vs. Kong. I like this movie quite a bit, and so when I do the beat by beat, I actually like a lot of the film. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I have major issues with it. So I might spend a little more time at the start having more of my criticism before I get into the more positive side of my review, which is fine. I've reviewed Godzilla vs. Kong a couple times on the channel before, and I've reviewed it very positively. So if you're not a person that likes criticism of these movies, you know, I know a lot of people are very defensive over, in particular, the Wingard films. and, you know, the MonsterVerse as a whole. So if you're one of those people that doesn't like the more critical reviews, then maybe this one's not going to be your favorite. And that's only because these Godzilla-Thons are such deep dives into these films that, of course, I am going to spend more time on it, which does mean I'm going to have more time to give my criticism. It's also because it's easier for me to elaborate on my critiques than it is for me to elaborate on the things that I love. You know, there's a lot that I love about this movie. As you'll see, I still do like this movie a lot. And as I go through it, it's harder for me to spend more time elaborating on what I love about it. And also, I think it's more unneeded to spend more time elaborating on what I love about it. Then if I have a criticism, I think it's important for me to spend time with that criticism so that you understand why I have it. You know, if I love something, that's fine. If I don't love something, I feel I should be able to justify what I don't love about it. You know what I mean? So I just want to get that out of the way. I'll be honest though, this movie has kind of broken me. I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest with you, because on the one hand, I really like this movie, and as you'll see when I go through it, there's a lot that I love about it, but on the other hand, I feel that my opinion on it has really shifted over time. In particular, this movie is what birthed the current landscape of the Godzilla fanbase that I really struggle to be a part of. I think that this movie could have been a lot of fun. There was a lot of potential for the fandom energy around the Godzilla vs. Kong fight to be very fun and to be very playful, you know, like people taking shots at different monsters, just having a good time with it. And of course that isn't what happened. Instead, this movie birthed a weird, I would say, insecurity and also ego in a very strong portion of this fan base that I think really killed a lot of the fun about it. You know, like it was not fun to be part of the Godzilla vs. Kong hype train, I would say, because it was really toxic. I would say a lot of Godzilla fans were very toxic about it. It was hard to take shots at Godzilla for fun, you know, trying to have fun with the concept of this being a versus movie. It was hard to do that because it was always going to upset people, and people would take it so seriously, you know, and they would threaten you, and they would be really toxic about it, and they would go beyond just playful banter about the films themselves. It was really ridiculous, and that persists, I would say, to this day. It's only actually in some cases gotten worse over time, you know, like with each time Godzilla and Kong fight, there's the bigger potential that Kong could pull out another victory, and that births more insecurity. Of course, like this amplifies with the new empire. And it's a shame that this does taint the way I watch this movie, because there are times when I watch this movie where I catch myself groaning about, like, why did they make that decision? Because that decision led to all of this annoyingness in the fan base. I see it a lot throughout this film. I see it a lot throughout the next film. And I think it ultimately comes down to, over time, I've become more critical of the script on this movie than I was when it came out. And I'll talk about that especially towards the end of this video. But when this movie came out, I noticed a lot of issues with it, and I looked past them, and now it is harder for me to look past them. And I'm saying all this up front because I found myself having kind of a negative reaction to rewatching this movie for Godzilla-Thon, which isn't an experience I'm used to. Normally when I turn this movie on, I have a really good time. I really enjoy this film, but I think two things have tainted that. Number one, I'm a little too close to it, spending so much time in this fan base making Godzilla content, especially talking about the MonsterVerse. I'm a little too close to it and a little burned out on the fandom. The fandom has not grown up or matured at all since this movie came out, and it continues to disappoint me, and this movie is a big cause of that, in that this movie, I think, due to a lot of the mistakes in the writing, it has created an atmosphere where it's easier to be toxic about Godzilla in particular, which is a shame. It's a really shame that my opinion has now been tainted by the fan base. That sucks, and that was always the risk that I ran by being a Godzilla YouTuber, and it is a bummer that it has caught up to me on this movie that I really love. And then number two, I think because I was actively engaging with the plot of the movie in order to write down my notes for Godzilla-Thon, as I write down extensive, very detailed notes, I was more aware of a lot of the movie's script issues, which I'm normally easy, you know, to overlook because I'll watch it in a breeze. This is a very fast-paced, very fun ride. I really love this movie as a ride, and I love this movie as just a nice pastime for 2 hours. It's a great way wait a past 2 hours. I saw this movie like so many times in theaters. It was a really cozy experience for me. And by the end of it, I was so familiar with the beats of this film that like by the second I got in the theater, the movie was already over. You know, it was a breeze. The second you make it to Holloworth, the film's already over. That was how it became because I had seen it so many times and it was really awesome. Like I loved it and I needed it. And now when I'm engaging with it to take notes on it, I'm having to reconcile with the fact that I've always known there was script issues and it's become really hard for me to overlook them. And I'll explain that as we go through it. But getting into the movie, I really do love this intro. We start out somewhere on Skull Island. There's so much that I love about it, you know. I love the color palette of Skull Island. I love that they literally start with not quite technically the Kong Skull Island font, but pretty close to the Kong Skull Island font with that Kong Skull Island colored font gradient on it. That's great. I love the intro to this movie. I think it's fantastic. I love this song, you know, Over the Mountains Across the Sea. It's a great way to open the film with those Kong vibes. I always love that in the MonsterVerse now we've given Kong kind of this vibey 70s, 60s soundtrack. It's fantastic. I love it. That, of course, started with Jordan Vogt Roberts' Kong Skull Island, but we start out somewhere on Skull Island with Kong waking up and going about his morning routine. I really like that scene. I like it a lot. I think it gives Kong a lot of presence. You know, it's a very fun sequence. It immediately roots you in his character journey, and it's also immediately where I come to my first crossroads. Of course, the scene of Kong scratching his butt is fine. This whole intro plays out as kind of a Shrek homage, which is very strange. Like, why are we referencing Shrek at the start of our Godzilla movie? I don't know, but this whole intro plays out kind of like a Shrek thing. But starting the movie with Kong scratching his butt does two things. Number one, it disarms the audience immediately, telling them this movie is gonna be one that has fun. Like, you're supposed to have fun with this movie. You're supposed to just have a good time. And that's a great way to immediately let the audience know what the tone of this film is gonna be. It's gonna be sillier. It's gonna be more campy. It's gonna be more cheesy. It's gonna be one for you to just have fun with. And that's fine. You know, I can get behind that at times, but that's the issue I've been running into. At times I can let it go. At other times, it's really hard for me to let it go. I think that this intro does a lot for Kong in both characterizing him and kind of destroying what I loved about him in Kong Skull Island. Kong Skull Island still has my favorite portrayal of Kong to date. He is this lonely, mysterious, noble god with a lot of honor and trauma and weight and sorrow and anger and ferocity and intelligence and so much going on with so little. Kong Skull Island does so much with so little. This movie, within one scene in the intro here, immediately dismantles the Kong that had been built up through Kong Skull Island and instead presents us with a big man. And I think that's my big issue with it. Kong doesn't feel to me like the Kong from Kong Skull Island. He feels to me like a neutered version of that Kong. It doesn't feel like it's a totally different character. I still see where it's the Kong from Kong Skull Island, but he feels very neutered to me. He feels like they made a big man versus Godzilla rather than King Kong versus Godzilla. This isn't a monster at all. He isn't. He's kind of more like a superhero, but he's really more like an old man, which is my other thing that I'm very like, I don't get it. I don't understand the creative decision to make a Godzilla vs. Kong movie and immediately establish within the very first scene that Kong is past his prime. He's portrayed as a little older here. He is out of weight. He's literally got kind of a beer belly rocking in this movie, and he is just kind of old and tired. And Adam Wingard in the commentary, you know, and in the interviews for Godzilla vs. Kong is very open about this. He says his goal was to portray Kong as something of an old Elvis at the end of his lifespan. You know, by the time Elvis was right about to die, he still had this legendary king persona, but the age had caught up to him and he was kind of out of shape and he was kind of, you know, he didn't look as good as he used to and he wasn't moving like he used to. And that was Adam Wingard's basis for Kong? You're gonna set us a Godzilla vs. Kong movie and we're not even getting Kong at his peak? And keeping in mind Kong's lifespan here, you know, the species lifespan, Kong is young as hell. The fact that those great apes can live for thousands of years, as we find out with Scar King, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years, the fact that the great apes can live this long, I understand that it creates a kind of a strange thing where, and I guess technically Kong's not a great ape, he's a Kong, but it creates kind of this strange scenario, right, where Kong in Kong Skull Island is a young man, you know, supposed to be like an adolescent, like a child or maybe even a teenager. So how do you beef him up to have him fight Godzilla? I'd say just make him a young adult, you know? I wouldn't, you know, I could even get behind Kong not even being in his prime because he has hasn't fully matured yet, rather than he's past maturity. It's just a strange decision right off the bat to say Kong in a way has been nerfed before the movie even starts. The Godzilla vs. Kong fight you've all been wanting, it's going to be Kong past his prime versus Godzilla, who very much can never leave his prime, and now after the events of Godzilla King of the Monsters is supercharged, and I know that's also kind of a topic that the fandom debates, but definitively, if you track Godzilla's feats before and after King of the Monsters, the guy's a different breed after King of the Monsters. He's a lot stronger than he used to be, and he operates very differently. And so to say like Godzilla's now entered his new prime and Kong is past his prime is a very bizarre choice. It I feel like immediately establishes that Kong is going to lose this movie, which I guess is the point, you know, to get you to be like Kong's the underdog and you kind of feel bad for him right off the bat. It's just bizarre to me. He's like sad and depressed in this movie. He's not rageful. He's not looking for vengeance. Like, I think there's so many other things that this movie could have done with Kong. The decisions they make with him is strange, which really gets into my idea about my whole thoughts on the script as a whole. I like what we have here. I actually really like it. And as you guys know, I really gravitate towards this portrayal of Kong. It's the one that I find the most relatable. Kong 2021 is the one that I find the most relatable. It's the one that I really love. And there's something about him that really struck me when watching this movie that I identified myself in very strongly. And that's also not a mistake. Adam Wingard says he modeled Kong's portrayal in this film very much after himself. And you get that with the beard in particular. You know, Adam Wingard gave Kong a beard to reflect the fact that he in real life grew a big one. So in many ways, Kong is a reflection of Adam Wingard, and so therefore it's not weird to identify human traits in him. Obviously, that's the point of what they've done here. And I really identified with Kong, with kind of a lot of the sadness and anger and loneliness he feels in this movie, and the fact that he was still searching for himself. That's how I felt when this movie came out, and I really identified to it and gravitated towards it. But it is strange, because that's not the Kong we left off with in Kong Skull Island. It has some of those qualities, but they've been really over-anthropomorphized, and in many ways, we're also not playing to the strengths and weaknesses of the Kong and Godzilla of the MonsterVerse. This is kind of like the idea of King Kong versus Godzilla. The fact is, I wanted a movie that took Godzilla as he was in the MonsterVerse and played to his strengths and weaknesses, and took Kong as he was in the MonsterVerse and played to his strengths and weaknesses. And this movie doesn't do that. This movie gives them entirely different strengths and weaknesses. Godzilla's strength in the MonsterVerse I actually would not say is his atomic breath. That is very much not his strength in the MonsterVerse. If he's not supercharged, like we see at the start of King of the Monsters and in 2014, don't even get me started on the Muto EMP, that's for a different video. Godzilla his atomic breath is not the strongest in the MonsterVerse unless it's been supercharged. Godzilla is really what he dominates with is his brute strength and his weight. I mean, Godzilla is a heavy fighter. Kong, on the other hand, had the really strong fighting strategy. He had a lot of great strategy, mobility, agility, and intelligence. You know, Godzilla has weaknesses in the MonsterVerse. His atomic breath charge up is slow. He has weakened gills. Like we noticed in 2014, he's very vulnerable through the gills. In fact, that's something they sort of bring back up in Monarch Legacy of Monsters. That's how the Ion Dragon's able to injure him, is by biting him in the gills. These are things that Kong should have been able to use to his advantage. The slow atomic breath charge up, the gills that are very much vulnerable weak points, also something that was brought back up in Fortnite of all things. And then also the ability to outmaneuver Godzilla. Godzilla really struggled with opponents who were quick. He was missing shots against Ghidorah. He was really struggling in the 2v1 with the Mutos because they were fast. In fact, Godzilla couldn't even take the Muto down in Hawaii by himself. The male Muto, very small compared to him, couldn't even take it down because it was able to outmaneuver him. It escaped him. These are areas you could play to Godzilla's weaknesses. Kong's weakness is obviously his literal durability. Kong is not durable. He doesn't have a strong durability like Godzilla. You could play into the fire angle of it, you know, like in Kong Skull Island, Kong gets set on fire and passes out. There's a big misunderstanding about that. Kong passes out because of the napalm suffocating him, not because of the fire burning him. It's actually very much supposed to be the case that Kong is fireproof in that movie. I think it's been misunderstood by the fan base, but Kong is supposed to be fireproof. It's the napalm starving him of oxygen that knocks him out. But Godzilla doesn't shoot fire. He shoots atomic breath. That's a totally different ball game. I very much think you should have played it the 1962 way, in that it damages Kong heavily, but it's not a kill shot, as it's never been in the MonsterVerse up to this point. The atomic breath had to be used very strategically to be a kill shot in the MonsterVerse. This movie totally throws all of that out the window. This movie portrays it as Godzilla's strengths are his atomic breath, his overwhelming fighting power, like he's super fast. Godzilla in this movie is more agile than he's been before. I know he sprints in King of the Monsters, but this Godzilla is a whole different level. This Godzilla is very strong, very agile. He actually doesn't have any weaknesses, come to think of it. This Godzilla, I don't think he has any weaknesses. I guess the only weakness we're given for him is maybe stamina, in that after the GVK fight, Mechagodzilla is able to catch him when he's down, but even that's not very well portrayed. Meanwhile, Kong has actually very few strengths. They don't really play to his intelligence other than one moment where he uses a building as a shield against Godzilla's atomic breath. Instead, they give Kong an axe out of nowhere. It's not even something he discovers on his own. I still, to this day, think a more compelling way to get the axe would be for Kong to realize that the spines on Godzilla's back is what's charging his atomic breath, so just rip one of them out of him and use it as a weapon against him. Play into the idea that Kong Skull Island presented, which is that Kong was incredibly observant and very willing to use his environment to his advantage. Kong could be knocking buildings over onto Godzilla, like we see in Godzilla 2014. That's a way to knock Godzilla down for a minute. Kong could knock a building onto him. Hell, Kong could even build an axe of his own. Maybe we learn that Kong's been building tools on Skull Island already. As we see in this movie, he knows how to make spears out of trees, pretty cool. But Kong could have learned over the years, working close enough to Monarch, living next to Monarch, and living with the Iwi, who made handmade tools. You know, they made stone tools and such, or even beyond stone tools. Kong could have learned from the people around him the same way he learns ASL. That's great. You know, he could have learned by watching. Playing into how observant he is and his intelligence, I'm fine with Kong making an axe on his own. Back in the day, I think I would have been a little resistant to it, but if it was portrayed in a way that it was really playing to Kong's strengths as a character, I'd be all for it. I think it would have been really compelling, and it would have been a really compelling way to kind of nerf Godzilla's atomic breath as well, you know? If Godzilla's atomic breath was still going to be as strong as it's portrayed here in this movie, one really compelling way to kind of circumvent that would be for Kong to rip out one of the key spines that's meant to charge that atomic breath up, so Godzilla can never charge it all the way. It's a way to play to the strengths and the weaknesses of these characters in the way that I think makes versus movies very fun. Basically, what I wanted was for them to essentially treat the characters like video game characters, break down what are their strengths and their weaknesses. Godzilla, for all intents and purposes, is a boss fight for Kong. What are the vulnerable weak points Kong is gonna need to target? How is he gonna learn what those weak points are? And will he be able to pull it off? Ultimately, I've always thought that Kong should lose in a fight to Godzilla, despite the fact that I have been on Team Kong. It was that I was on Team Kong from a character perspective, not that I was on Team Kong from a I think he's stronger than Godzilla and would win perspective. I don't think he's stronger than Godzilla, and I don't think he would win. But I think that there was a more compelling way to go about this fight. These are a lot of the issues I have with this movie that is instantly started in this first scene when we essentially strip Kong of all of the nuance and a lot of the stuff that made him special in Kong Skull Island and present him as just a man who's going to be going up against Godzilla when he's at his lowest. What a strange decision. This movie has a lot of strange decisions, and I think a lot of it comes from trying to streamline the script, as we'll talk about as we go. The longer you think about this film, the less most of it makes sense. There's constantly things that come up in this movie that you go, really, that's how you're going about this? And I never realized until this moment, for Godzilla-Thon, when I was taking notes, how exposition heavy the first act of this script is. That's something that I've criticized Kong Skull Island, my favorite movie of the MonsterVerse, for. It's something that you could criticize Godzilla King of the Monsters for as well. They pack a lot of exposition into the first acts of both of those movies. This movie's on a different level, and it's silly because a lot of the exposition is very unneeded and kind of overwhelming. For instance, the whole idea of a Godzilla versus Kong war, which is about to be brought up for the first time during this opening sequence, it's a very strange call to say that Godzilla and Kong hate each other because of an ancestral war. Is it a reference to the fact that the 1962 fight happened and this is kind of building off the legacy of that movie? Maybe. That kind of seems to be why they went with the old rivals angle with Godzilla and King Ghidorah, to play into the idea that, you know, there's been a long rivalry of Godzilla and King Ghidorah in films, but they worked that into the themes of the movie. That really means something thematically. Godzilla represents order. King Ghidorah represents chaos. Those two things have always been at war. Godzilla, in many ways in that film, is presented as a god. Ghidorah is presented as the devil. Those things have always been at war. You know who hasn't been at war? Lizards and monkeys. There is no thematic weight to the Godzilla vs. Kong war here. So I'm very confused by its inclusion. And they're not even willing to fully commit to that, because is that the reason they're fighting? Or is it because they're both alpha titans? It's actually both reasons. We don't need both reasons to be the reason they fight. We need one reason to be the reason they fight, and neither of those reasons are personal. Once again, a script issue. This movie has no personal weight to the Godzilla vs. Kong fight. Godzilla hates Kong because of an ancestral war. I've brought up in videos how, in a way, that makes Godzilla a racist, and I'm always bringing that up just kind of to point out the absurdity of it. I'm taking a shot at the movie for sure. I'm making a joke of it, but that's not to undercut my point. My point is, there's no actual beef between Godzilla and this Kong. And I'm fine with that. I think in 1962 it was okay that they were just forced on a collision course and the two of them had to fight because they're literally forced into proximity with each other. I think you could have done something similar with that here, but I proposed an idea all the way back in 2019 that I still think holds more weight than this movie gives us, and that is Godzilla needs a home for the Titans. That's the compelling plot thread that is left off in Godzilla King of the Monsters, and in fact, you've heard me yap about that in videos that have come out on the channel as recently as like a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago. I've been talking about how Godzilla needs a home for the surface Titans. Where are they gonna go? They shouldn't be killed, and they should not be put to bed simply because Godzilla doesn't know what to do with them, and they don't really coexist with humanity all that well. Godzilla needs the Titans. They serve a very, very vital function to nature's balance. Back in 2019, I came up with the idea, based on the end credits to Godzilla King of the Monsters, which implied that the monsters are gravitating to Skull Island, that Godzilla is gonna lead the Titans to Skull Island as a sanctuary for them on the surface so they have somewhere to be. And this would cause problems because it would absolutely destroy the balance of nature on Skull Island itself, meaning Godzilla and Kong are drawn into conflict with each other because Kong's balance has now been destroyed. The solution in this case would have been the Hollow Earth, would have been sending Kong to the Hollow Earth. Maybe you send some of the other Titans to the Hollow Earth, and Skull Island becomes a safety beacon on the surface for some of the Titans. Maybe Kong can go in and out if he so pleases. He could become the king of Skull Island and the Hollow Earth, who knows? Maybe he's, in a way, kind of like an ambassador of the, the Hollow Earth, and Skull Island is his little embassy on the surface, in a way. I think that's all cool stuff, and it would have drawn the two of them into conflict with each other. Of course, I pitched the idea way back in the day in my movie pitch, which I was following very rigid rules for that pitch, but all the way back in the day in, I believe, 2020, I pitched the idea that maybe Godzilla accidentally causes the destruction of the Iwi village, or maybe the Iwi village is destroyed by King Ghidorah and Kong blames Godzilla. There are plenty of ways to draw these two into a personal conflict with each other, a personal conflict. This movie does not have a personal conflict until the very end, when Godzilla destroys Kong's ancestral home, and Kong's not even allowed to get revenge for it. It's a very strange script decision as well. We're just told that Godzilla can do whatever he wants. He can destroy Kong's life, and Kong can't have any sort of retaliation. What a weird, weird movie. What a weird fact that this movie has absolutely no thematic weight. I really used to make the argument that maybe this movie was about letting go of past beefs, Godzilla's holding a grudge against Kong because of something Kong's ancestors did, and maybe the theme of this movie is to let go of your hatred on the grounds of race. If you want to try and add some sort of really rich thematic quality to this movie, maybe the lesson Godzilla learns is to not judge Kong based on the war he had with his ancestors, to let go of that. And for Kong, the lesson would be to let go of his pride. In many ways, we're telling Godzilla to let go of his ego and biases, and for Kong to let go of his pride. And that would be the message of this movie, but the next film they fight again for no reason, meaning that this movie really doesn't have anything to say. I guess the most we can pull from Godzilla vs. Kong is the very typical story of AI run amok with Mechagodzilla, but that's not really a theme baked into the movie as much as they wanted Mechagodzilla to be the thing that Godzilla and Kong teamed up against, which was a decision made because Adam Wingard specifically, again in the commentary, admits he was inspired by Batman vs. Superman not doing the idea of the versus match and then the team up very compellingly. He wanted to show that you can do it better, and I think he absolutely did. He pulled it off very well in this movie. But that's to say, I'm very confused by a lot of the decisions Titans made here. I like the movie we got. That's something that's always been true. I've always liked Godzilla vs. Kong. I would say I love Godzilla vs. Kong. I do think that there's a better version of this movie out there, and I don't think you have to work hard to find it. I don't even think you have to make major changes. Again, simply changing the way Skull Island is destroyed as Godzilla was trying to herd the Titans there. Maybe we even say the Titans are needed in Hollow Earth to achieve nature's balance, or some of the Titans need to go to Hollow Earth, and Skull Island has the only accessible Hollow Earth portal at the moment, so Godzilla needs to send the Titans to Skull Island to get them to Hollow Earth, and in the process destroy Skull Island. That is a compelling motive for Godzilla and Kong to fight. Kong would have personal reason to hate Godzilla, and now, in a way, Kong's going on a revenge quest, but a revenge quest that we, the audience, can understand both sides of. Kong was wronged by Godzilla, who destroyed his island and who accidentally got his people killed. Godzilla, though, needed to do that. He had no other choice. And now Kong and Godzilla have a very compelling, very three-dimensional reason to fight each other. That's a way to get two heroes to fight. Or you go with the script idea. The original script for Godzilla vs. Kong had it so that they were both being manipulated. If you want your Mechagodzilla plotline, you already had the solution. It's so weird to me. The Orca Z being used as a way to make Godzilla look like the bad guy when in fact Godzilla was simply acting out of pure instinct because the Orca Z was manipulating him, having the Orca Z manipulate Godzilla and Kong into fighting each other. The only thing that does is it kind of robs the two of them of a personal motive to be fighting, but this movie doesn't give us a compelling personal motive for them to fight in the first place. They're fighting because of an ancestral race war with some very odd implications to it. In the other instance, they're fighting because they're being used by somebody else. Is that a little too much like Batman versus Superman? I guess maybe. I think I would have been all on board for that. For Godzilla and Kong to be fighting because the Orca was amplifying their aggression. Maybe they don't like each other in general. Maybe they don't get along. But the fact that the Orca is the thing keeping them fighting or making it so that they cannot let go of their pride and their anger, that's fine with me. I'm totally good with that. I think everybody would have been. But I think they dropped that plot thread because they wanted to streamline the movie, they wanted to make it more fun and upbeat, and they also wanted to eliminate some of the connections to Godzilla King of the Monsters because that movie underperformed, and therefore you don't want this movie to be super heavily tied to the one that not as many people have seen so that they don't feel lost. Very easy thing to explain. You don't even need to fully explain that it's like building off of the tech of the Orca from King of the Monsters as much as you could just say it's Mechagodzilla's eye. Mechagodzilla's eye has something called the Orca Z built into it. This is built off technology that we've seen something similar to this before. You could even kind of recap the plot of King of the Monsters, or you could just leave it at this technology, it's used to make the Titans angry, and it's making them angry right now. So many ways to go about this. I know I'm not really following my typical plot by plot, beat by beat formula here, but it's because this is a movie that I've simmered with for a long time, and a lot of my issues have only grown over the years, and that's, I actually think, unfortunately, a little bit also to do with the way I feel about the next film. I'll get back to my plot by plot, we'll go through it here, and we'll just talk about it as we go. I feel bad because now I've spent 30 minutes talking about some of my issues with the movie, so now is anybody even going to believe that I like it in the first place? I know a lot of people think I hate this movie and New Empire, when I do not hate this movie. I really do like this movie. New Empire is one I will catch back up to you with on the next Godzilla-Thon, or whenever we get there in Godzilla-Thon, because I haven't rewatched it in a while, so let me rewatch it and then see how I feel now. But generally speaking, I do like that movie. Alright, we catch up with Kong. He's going about his morning routine. He realizes something's off. I really like that. I love the VFX here. I love the way Kong looks. I love that shot of him walking out and sniffing the air with all the leaf wings flying past him. That's great. And then the last Iwi also notices Kong has figured out something's wrong. I feel bad about what they've done to the Iwi. In a lot of ways, it feels like this movie disrespects the movie Kong Skull Island very heavily by just destroying Skull Island, destroying their portrayal of Kong, destroying the Iwi, destroying the mythology of that movie, kind of in some ways undercutting a lot of the themes of that movie. I feel bad about that for sure. I do. But this was not how Skull Island was supposed to be destroyed. It was actually in the original script supposed to be destroyed more similarly to how I said. They were going to send the Titans there. There was going to be more to do with the Hollow Earth portal on Skull Island causing some destruction on the island. In fact, in one script, some concept art came out where you see the island's destroyed by a volcano. Maybe that's a little too similar to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, so that's maybe the reason they changed that plotline, is because the volcano had just been done in Jurassic World. But there was originally a plotline where they were using a Orca device. They were going to use a newly built Orca to lure some of the Titans to Skull Island, and they were actually eventually going to try and send them through the Hollow Earth portal themselves. I believe you were supposed to get a Behemoth cameo there, but things change, and this is one of them. So in the end, we pick up and it's like a whole nother movie has happened in between this movie, which Monarch Legacy of Monsters seems aware of and is trying to fix. But yeah, we pick up and they're like, yep, Skull Island got destroyed. Yeah, it's all gone. The Iwi are all dead, and Kong's a totally different guy than you remember. And I guess it's been quite a long time since we left him off in the 70s, but it is a big jump to get to where we are now. So Gia approaches Kong. They have this great little moment together. I love the bond between Gia and Kong. I actually think Gia might be the best human character introduced to the King Kong mythology ever. I love the idea of giving Kong a very special connection with a human that only he can have. A non-verbal connection that he can have with a human. I love that she's deaf. I think that's a fantastic thing. It's, first of all, great inclusion, great way to include the deaf community into this movie. And also, it's a great way to build the connection between her and Kong, that they both aren't able to communicate with the rest of society in a way that everybody else can. They don't have the ease of communication. They have to communicate through other means. A lot of deaf people really struggle, as I've learned by meeting Kaylee Hoddle, who plays Gia here. It's a kind of a struggle to get the rest of society to understand the struggle that they have, to understand some of the things that they deal with that we don't think about, It's interesting. And I love the idea that Gia and Kong have a connection that only they can have. I also love that she's one of the Skull Island natives. I really appreciate that the MonsterVerse completely changes the way the natives are portrayed on Skull Island, as the other portrayals can be problematic and are very limited. But I love their little moment. They have this little beat together, but that doesn't dissuade Kong. He stands up and he spears the freaking sun with a tree, and what would have been a crazy plot twist that had not been spoiled in the trailer, but holy crap, that's a great moment. Kong throws his tree spear into the sun, and we find out that Kong is stuck in a massive containment zone, protecting him and the last safe space of Skull Island after a random storm has destroyed it and flooded the island, and the rest of the island is all gone and completely wiped out. And this movie, here's my other big issue with it, never bothers to explain some major things like this. Now, of course, there is a comic book that does its best to explain that. The canonicity of that comic book is very questionable. As far as a script goes, though, we're never given an explanation in the script for Godzilla vs. Kong as to what happened to Skull Island, why a storm destroyed it, and why now. We're never told. This movie doesn't bother. It doesn't bother to tell us how long of a heads up they had, how they built that containment dome. They didn't tell us anything. This movie doesn't bother to tell us most things. It just presents you with an idea and moves along as if you get it. You've always known that, right? Like the idea that they get Kong onto the ship later. How? There was originally a scene that explained it. It was going to be a scene throwing back to King Kong versus Godzilla where they put him to sleep and then move him onto that raft. We never see that in the movie, and I'm not even saying we need to, but I would like to know some things. We're never told anything. Later it's presented as a big new idea that they can airlift Kong, and it's like, so clearly that's not how you got him on the boat. How'd you get him on the boat? That's always been the meme, is how do they get Kong on the boat? Most movies don't bother to explain it. It's fine most of the time, and I would totally overlook it here if this was the only instance of something like that happening, where I'm left questioning, how did that happen? But the fact is, everything that happens in this movie I'm left questioning, how did that happen? How did they do that? Where did that come from? Why did that happen? I don't want to be left with a lot of questions like that, because it means that the script doesn't have an answer for me. I don't care if a comic book does. I don't care if a novelization does. I'm not reviewing those. I'm reviewing the movie. I would even be fine with it if they expanded upon some of this stuff in a sequel, in the next movie, and gave some answers. It wouldn't be great. It would still mean that this movie was unfinished, which is how it feels to me. The script feels unfinished, but at least the answers would be there in a film, meaning somebody thought about it and put it into a movie. Never happens. So I bring up this case because the destruction of Skull Island continues to this day to be left a mystery on screen. We never learn in a film what happened to the island, and I think that's really bad. To destroy one of the most iconic, mysterious islands in the entire cinema history, do it so unceremoniously, and also never expand upon it, That's pretty bad. It's also the inciting freaking incident for this entire film, getting Kong off the island because it's been destroyed by a storm and we don't even know how it happened. Are you kidding me? I feel very passionately that this script is unfinished, and it really stuck out to me on this watch, which is a shame because normally I can overlook it, but for the purposes of reviewing it beat by beat, it became very apparent how unfinished a lot of these ideas are. Anyways, we're introduced to another character I really like, which is Dr. Eileen Andrews. I think she's great. She's Gia's adopted mom. She's the Kong specialist. She is the head of the Skull Island division for Monarch, and I really like her. Rebecca Hall plays her great. She's very charismatic. I think she's a lot of fun. She's informed that Kong can't survive on this small of a space of land for long, and that it's time for Kong to leave, but she fears taking Kong off Skull Island will attract Godzilla and restart an ancient war between their species. I would even be fine with it if just the idea was, you know, I really don't love the whole idea of an alpha titan, but if the idea of it was Kong has the ability to disturb nature's balance in such a prominent way by upsetting Godzilla's command of the other titans or whatever, that is the reason that Godzilla wants Kong gone, that's fine. But the fact that there's this whole ancient war that we never expand upon, we don't learn anything about it, and the next movie presents us with a whole different ancient war that many people think is actually the same one, but it isn't. This is a war between the Godzilla species and the Kong species that raged across the surface and in Hollow Earth and throughout Iwi legend. The next one is a different isolated war led by a rebellious group of great apes under the control of Scar King. Totally different scenario. Actually, if that was the war that we're referring to here, if we later learn that the Godzilla-Kong war was actually Godzilla's war with Scar King, it makes Godzilla's decision to fight Kong even more baffling, as Kong isn't Scar King, and one great ape, Godzilla doesn't, I guess, know that this is a Kong in that instance. One great ape shouldn't be that big of a threat to Godzilla. If the idea was that the Godzillas and the Kongs had a war, and the Kongs, not the great apes, crazy that that's not the same thing, but it isn't. The Kongs are a different species. The Kongs were smarter and stronger than the great apes and very capable of killing many members of Godzilla's species. Now, I can understand why Godzilla would be a little nervous. We'd need to expand upon that a little bit, but I'd understand. Godzilla's nervous because the Kong species has shown aggression towards his species in the past and has killed many of his kind. That could be something that Godzilla's a little freaked out about. That could be something that Godzilla feels a need to be proactive about, the way that he was with the Mutos. I would get that if they expanded upon it. But nowadays, with the current state of the MonsterVerse, they're not even really allowed to acknowledge out loud that the Godzilla species is a species, which means what's the axe made out of? Who is Godzilla so worried about? Because he's been able to take on those Kongs by himself in the past, or the great apes, and they've never been able to harm or kill one of his species because he's the only one of his species. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? The long-term storytelling in the MonsterVerse is really one of the things that kills me the most. If this movie's a standalone and was the only movie of its kind, like this is the only MonsterVerse film, there's no others, I'd have a pretty fun time with it. It'd be like that came out of nowhere, but you know, that'd be alright. As a standalone movie, this one works as a standalone. As part of a long-term narrative, this movie is baffling to me. Anyways, we finally 40 freaking minutes into my review, make it to the title montage. I love the title montage. It is pure hype. It builds up the excitement of Godzilla and Kong fighting so well. It's the best song Junkie XL does for the soundtrack, including his rip-off Godzilla theme. This is the best iteration of his rip-off Godzilla theme that we hear. I love the mashup between the Godzilla theme and the Kong theme. This whole intro is so cool. It also is done in a very kind of cheesy way. It's like a sports bracket, and again, kind of disarms you, lets you know that this movie's just here to have fun, and if you can go along with the fun factor, this movie is great. I really love it. I was really struggling to go along with the fun factor on my most recent watch, but that is to say, I've seen this movie dozens of times, and I've not really struggled with it every time. Most of the time, I really do enjoy this movie as is, as a spectacle, as a fun little romp. This time in particular, because I'm doing this in-depth breakdown, I was struggling. Anyways, we pick up in Pensacola, Florida. Bernie Hayes, a brand new character and one of the leads of this movie, is the host of the Titan Truth podcast, a conspiracy theory podcast looking into the shady goings-ons in this world. I like the idea of conspiracy theorists in the MonsterVerse. Bryan Cranston's Joe Brody does a great job at that. This was a case where Bernie Hayes leans a little too far. I absolutely despise the fluoride in the water part of this movie. I think that it really calls into question, what are we doing here? I understand that Adam Wingard also has reservations about the implications of Bernie Hayes being a conspiracy theorist, especially this movie came out during the 2020 era, during 2021, when that was kind of really becoming a very big issue. You know, I think that this version of a conspiracy theorist, he walks the line between being done in a way that I think is very fun and then being done in a way that I find very cringe and at times like downright unlikable. Bryan Cranston's version was a more realistic version for this world, and in many ways a more compelling version, but not a more fun version. He wouldn't fit the tone of this movie, and so I like Bernie Hayes. I like what they're going for, although this movie doesn't quite nail him. I think that this movie's Bernie Hayes is over the top and frustrating. They nail him in the next one, so that's great. But Brian Tyree Henry does a fantastic job with the material he's given, and he's incredibly likable. Today's the day he steals data from his job at Apex Cybernetics to try and prove that there is criminal activity going on there at the outwardly humanitarian company. I wish we had some Apex Cybernetics setups in Godzilla King of the Monsters, some references to Apex Cybernetics, and certainly I wish that in the post-credit scene of Godzilla King of the Monsters, some Apex employees were the ones who took control of Ghidorah's head, especially because it's not a very well-kept mystery that they're the ones building Mechagodzilla, so it would have only built hype for the fact that they built Mechagodzilla because we'd know they have Ghidorah's head, so we'd actually be like, what are they doing? Is it Mechagodzilla they're building? Is it Mecha King Ghidorah? What do they have going on? What is it gonna be? It would have built a little more hype if Apex Cybernetics had any acknowledgement in the last film, but this is the world building that this movie gives us. It drops Apex Cybernetics, a game-changing organization, into this movie as if they've always been here, and they do no build-up or setup for them. They do nothing to earn it. They're just here. I do really like the intro, though. That little moment with the CEO, Walter Simmons, on the TV where he's talking about how their goal is to lead humanity into this new, bold new era. That's the closest we get to a connection to Godzilla King of the Monsters, as at the end of Godzilla King of the Monsters, we're told that it's a brave new world we're a part of, and here we're told we're entering a bold new era. I like the idea of Apex as well. The idea that we've got this company that truly isn't all that evil, at least as presented in this movie. Like, Walt Simmons' goal is to kill the Titans so that humanity can be free from them. It's not portrayed in this movie as he wants to rule the world with Mechagodzilla. As this movie presents it, Walt Simmons is worried that the Titans are such a danger, he needs to kill them off so that humanity can be safe, and the only way to do that is with his Mechagodzilla. I think that's a very compelling motive. I think that's actually very interesting, and I wish we developed it a little more because it's very nuanced. We obviously know Godzilla's a good guy and that some of the Titans are good guys, but from the humanity's perspective, the entire planet was sent into a downright apocalypse in 2019. Most people alive would want the Titans dead, probably including Godzilla. Almost everybody should be at the point Mark Russell was at the start of the last film. That's great. So while Bernie is stealing the data about Sublevel 33 and learning that there's this mysterious shipping manifest heading to Hong Kong, a Titan evacuation alarm goes off. I think that this is a great sequence. The movie's moving at a brisk pace, unlike this review. It's so fun. I love it. Godzilla appears in the bay. He looks fantastic. This is one of my favorite Godzilla scenes in this movie for sure. I think it's so cool. I love that shot of Ren Serizawa looking out at Godzilla as he starts battling the jets. It's really exciting to get a very Toho spin on Godzilla in the MonsterVerse, and this is his only justified attack in the movie, I would say, because Godzilla begins his attack. He starts destroying the facility. I love the way the atomic breath works here. It's so cool, so destructive. Feels a lot like it's in line with the way it was presented in 2014 as well. It's kind of wispy, not as powerful. I really like it. While Godzilla's destroying massive sections of this factory with his atomic breath, he exposes an enormous, blinking red mechanical eye that is pulsing an orca-like signal, clearly the thing agitating Godzilla. One of my big questions is, why does Godzilla assume his job is done and leave? Godzilla is on the warpath, destroying this factory, and then just calls it quits. It would have been more compelling if we saw the eye turn off and then Godzilla leave. Now, I understand that might have been playing your hand a little too soon. So you could have Godzilla leave without us getting an explanation and later reveal it's because they turned the eye off so that he would leave. That is what the original script explained. Godzilla leaves because the eye is an orca signal. There is a device called the Orca Z embedded in Mechagodzilla that was causing Godzilla to go on the attack. They turned it off, and so Godzilla leaves. That is not what happens in this movie. Godzilla is instead an enormous idiot. This movie makes Godzilla the dumbest guy around. He thinks his job's done here and calls it a day. He thinks that he kills Kong at sea and calls it a day. He can't find Mechagodzilla in Hong Kong later on. He gets distracted from his mission to fight Mechagodzilla to go fight Kong in the first place. This Godzilla's a dummy. He's constantly getting tricked. Kong can throw something and trick Godzilla as to where he is. I love that moment, but my point is, over and over again, this movie portrays Godzilla as an idiot. And it's not even portrayed in a way that Kong can use it to his advantage, like Godzilla's weakness is that Kong is a thinking animal and Godzilla's got the brain the size of a pea. Instead, Godzilla's just dumb because the plot needed him to be. I don't love that. You know what else I don't love is what comes immediately afterward, because although I love that destruction scene, we pick up with the news considering this as proof that Godzilla is not a hero. But Madison Russell isn't convinced. She instead meets Mark Russell at a Monarch relief camp, and oh my god, what have we done to Mark Russell? Absolute character assassination. It dawned on me recently that Godzilla King of the Monsters is a religious metaphor. The movie is about a man whose son was killed, and so he turned on God, believing that God could have saved his son but didn't. So he's turned on God. He's turned on his faith, on his own religion, and over the course of the film, he's slowly brought back into it, brought back into understanding the method of the God that he worships, understanding the sacrifice, and he really becomes a man of faith again. He has faith in Godzilla. He wants to help Godzilla. He loves what Godzilla does for the world by the end of that movie. He understands the need for it, and it's the priest. Dr. Serizawa is Godzilla's priest, is the one who passes a lot of this on to him. Sometimes these moments of crisis are also potential moments of faith. Are you kidding me? The religious imagery throughout that film. I'm not a particularly religious person, but it's a really beautiful metaphor, and I really love what that story is going for. And to have Mark, in one line, dismiss all of that character development throughout Godzilla King of the Monsters. Even if we're dropping the religious metaphor, Mark goes from a guy who hates Godzilla because Godzilla killed his son to a man who understands what Godzilla's role is and appreciates and goes out of his way to help Godzilla. He saves Godzilla's life and then teams up with him in the final fight, and it's only through their cooperation that the world can be saved. He comes to embody the key to coexistence. Mark recreates the Orca with Emma so that they can team up with Godzilla. And now within one line, he dismisses all of that. It's all out the window. We throw away an entire movie's worth of character development for essentially a brief cameo. Mark Russell doesn't even need to be in this movie. We don't even need this scene with him. Or he could just say, sorry, Madison, I understand that there's a point to what you're saying here, but my job right now is focusing on the civilian restoration, making sure people are okay, helping out, the relief, the rebuild. I'm not the guy right now. I'm sorry, Madison. And so she has to do it on her own, rather than being like, yeah, no, I can't think of a single reason Godzilla could be on the offensive. It's not like we built an orca in the last movie that could make the Titans aggressive. I can't think of one single reason Godzilla would be upset with what's going on. I can't think of one reason he would attack when his whole thing is balancing nature, being nature's balance. I can't think of one way humanity could upset that balance in a way that Godzilla would take offense to. Instead, he denies that Godzilla was flashing an intimidation display despite being in the room for Godzilla's intimidation display and being the Godzilla fucking expert, the one who knew every single thing Godzilla was doing in the last movie, the guy who told Dr. Goddamn Serizawa to stand down and open the shields. Despite being the guy who my biggest issue with him in the last movie is that he's too smart, he chalks up Godzilla's current actions to because creatures like people can change. Godzilla changed? Are you kidding me, Mark? You changed writers, and the new writer doesn't understand your character at fucking all. I can't stand what they've done to Mark Russell, and it's made people in this fan base despise this guy. They don't like him. They think he's an idiot. They think he's arrogant. They think he's all of the worst parts of the character. All the things that he outgrows over the course of King of the Monsters, he embodies here. Oh, it frustrates me so much, man. What they've done to Mark Russell, I do feel that they did the same thing to Godzilla, taking Godzilla from his samurai portrayal, from his heroic persona he builds up by the end of Godzilla King of the Monsters and turning him into the heel. I feel that the same type of character assassination that happens to Mark happens to Godzilla. I think that embodies my big issue with this movie, is that this movie is not committed to developing the consequences and world of the last film in meaningful ways. It's committed to coming up with new things and pushing forward as if nothing happened before now. It acts like this is the first time we've been introduced to these characters and we're moving on. We're just moving on. Like, it really kills me. I understand that we might not want to be as committed to Godzilla King of the Monsters after that movie's box office underperformance. Fine, move away from it. Don't destroy it. Anyways, Madison turns out to be a huge fan of the Titan Truth podcast, which I suppose makes some level of sense. She's a big fan. What I don't like is that she's also a major conspiracy theorist. I believe Madison should have been a more troubled character, as she was supposed to be, troubled from the events of Godzilla King of the Monsters. I can understand why she'd grasp onto someone like Bernie Hayes' podcast. I get it. I think that her conspiracy theory angles is a step too far. It makes her a little unlikable, especially, again, that fluoride scene. I really don't like that stuff. I think that's kind of harmful to put in this movie in the first place. Pushing governmental conspiracies at a time when it was really important not to do that, as the U.S. Capitol could tell you. And also just kind of straying away from where I think she would fall after the last movie. After she was essentially dragged along with the conspiracy theory from her mother for so long, I think she'd be a little more resistant to them. Walter Simmons goes to former Monarch geologist Nathan Lind for help. We're kind of bringing in a similar plot thread with Godzilla King of the Monsters, with a former Monarch worker rejoining Monarch to help out here. I'm glad that we don't repeat any of the same plot beats with that character arc, though. I really like Nathan Lind. I think he's great. I really like Alexander Skarsgård. I think he's a very fun character here. And so they go to Nathan Lind for help. He was the #1 expert in Hollow Earth, following Houston Brooks, I suppose, but we don't really get any Houston Brooks mentions in this film. It's like he doesn't exist. He is the #1 leading expert in Hollow Earth and theorizes it's the birthplace of all of the Titans. Walter Simmons actually agrees with him, and with the help of Ren Serizawa, a character who is but just downright the worst character in this movie, in that I used to like the idea that you had to put the pieces together yourself and decide that Ren Serizawa was the son of Dr. Serizawa. You had to figure that out yourself. I don't like that anymore, because it's, again, my whole issue with this script is this movie doesn't build anything. It just presents things and moves along. There's no world building. Ren Serizawa, never even in the course of this entire film do we connect the dots that he is the son of Dr. Serizawa. We're given no motivation for him. We're given nothing. You get some of that in the novelization, but I don't want to read the fucking novelization to understand a movie. This movie should stand on its own, and Ren Serizawa is a really distracting inclusion. He's odd and underused and killed off unceremoniously. He originally was going to be more of a villain. We're going to learn more of his backstories. He was actually going to be orchestrating the whole thing, masterminding it. It was actually going to be him who kills Walter Simmons and takes control of Mechagodzilla as a villain in the end. They changed so much about Ren Serizawa that he is essentially just a shallow shell of a character. They should have changed his name. He should have been a different guy. Shouldn't have been the son of Dr. Serizawa. He should have been anybody. You could have called him Ren Ogata if you wanted a reference to the characters. No way is this Ren Serizawa who we kill off in this movie before we even come to understand him. And again, I know the novelization sort of leaves his fate ambiguous. You know who didn't care? The director of this movie and writer-director of the next, Adam Wingard, who clearly takes it that Ren Serizawa is dead and moved on. Not even an acknowledgement in the next film. This character is worthless. But Ren Serizawa is the technological lead over at Apex. He's scanned Earth. He's scanned the Hollow Earth. They have scans of it that don't align with what we were told about it in Godzilla King of the Monsters. No longer do we get Hollow Earth tunnels. Instead, there is a second planet inside of the planet we currently live on. There's a whole nother world down there, and there's an enormous energy signal down there, nearly identical to the energy of Godzilla. They plan to synthesize this energy so that it can power a weapon that can compete with Godzilla. I'm actually fine with the Hollow Earth energy. I think it's whatever. Of my issues with this movie, that's not really one of them. I'm fine with that one. That's a plot beat just like the orca was in the last movie, where it's like, what do you mean Mark needs to recreate the orca sound in order to locate where it's at? First of all, don't know how that would help. Secondly, doesn't he have a recording of it? Isn't he already ready to go with that sound? Here, it's like, well, if the energy signals are nearly identical to Godzilla, why do you need to synthesize it? Why not synthesize Godzilla's energy and use that? Who cares? That's a who cares plot beat, just like the orca signal was in the last movie. It works. It works. And so I'm moving on. Turns out Nathan Lind left Monarch after organizing a mission to Hollow Earth that completely failed, killing everyone involved, including his brother. Walter Simmons has designed this new vehicle, the Heave, that can survive the intense gravitational inversion upon the trip to Hollow Earth, enabling entry to and navigation through the Hollow Earth itself. To discover the source of the Hollow Earth energy, something that it's like, don't you guys have scanners that are picking it up from the surface? Wouldn't you guys be able to locate it yourselves? But again, I'm moving on. To find the source of the Hollow Earth energy, they need a Titan from the surface who will be able to find and show them the way using a sort of sense memory that the Titans are supposed to have. To accomplish this, Nathan Lind re-teams with his old Monarch colleague and friend, Eileen Andrews, so that they can take Kong to the closest Hollow Earth portal, which actually happens to be in Antarctica. It actually takes very little convincing. All Nathan needs to do is be like, hey, first of all, we're looking for a power source to power this new thing that can defend against the new scary Godzilla who's been causing problems. And also, it'll be a new home for Kong. And she's like, yeah, sure, all right. She doesn't love the idea, but it's time to get things moving. So we just abruptly cut to Kong on the ship being transported. He's sedated. He's being transported to Antarctica. Again, I'm kind of fine with all of this. I'm kind of fine with the way we breeze through this. If this was the only stuff we breezed through, that would be fine. This is all normal movie stuff right here. I really like that scene where Kong's being transported. I love the Elvis music playing. I love the vibes of it. And there is a full naval escort watching out for Godzilla, which is also great. I love the threat that we build up with Godzilla, where he's something we're really afraid of. And in fact, I love that they're watching out for Godzilla's territorial routes and trying to sail through not the most direct route, but a route that will avoid where Godzilla's been to try and get away from him. You know, I think that's really cool. It is interesting though that Kong wakes up 88% sedated as Maya Simmons arrives on the ship as the apex leader for the trip. Now, they never state this in the movie. The novelization again will give you an answer, but the movie, which needs to stand on its own, does not. As far as this movie is concerned, Kong straight up is 88% sedated during his first fight with Godzilla, which I always love to point out because Kong is at such a freaking disadvantage here, 88% sedated on a floating ship with nowhere to go, nowhere to run, nowhere to fight. He has no chance of winning this battle. I think it's a great way to put Kong up as the underdog and not show what he's capable of this early into the movie. It's really good stuff. I like it. I actually do like it, and it's different than the stuff we've seen before. I don't love them standing on aircraft carriers. That's universe-breaking physics right there, but I like the idea of what we're doing here. This is not the first time we've had a fight at sea like this, especially with a big barge transporting a Titan. We actually saw something like this all the way back in Godzilla vs. Mothra in 1992 with Godzilla fighting Mothra when she's on her giant egg transport ship, but this is the first time it's been portrayed the way it is here. I really like it. I love all the visuals here. I love this whole setup. This is all great to me. That night, they go over their game plan to find the Hollow Earth energy source, and Eileen reiterates the threat Godzilla poses. Here we get, once again, two different explanations for why they're gonna fight. It's both due to the threat of them both being alpha titans, and there can only be one alpha titan at a time, something that just doesn't exist in nature. We shouldn't be doubling down on. We should have moved away from in this movie. And due to the Iwi myths, that there is an ancient rivalry and war between these species that Godzilla will still harbor some sort of hatred for. They're natural enemies, which is a fine enough reason. Godzilla and Rodan beef in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster because they both are territorial animals, and being within each other's territory means they're gonna fight. They're not stated as being freaking alpha monsters. I don't like the idea that they're like the alpha angle is why they fight. I think it's really lame. But I like the idea that they're both egotistical, prideful, and territorial creatures. That is fine. Don't even overthink the motive. Maybe they don't need all that personal beef and drama that I talked about earlier in this review. Maybe the reason they fight is because they're both territorial and they've been brought into each other's territory. Okay, I'm good with that. Maybe the reason they don't know how to let go of their anger is because the Orca Z is making them even more angry. Okay, once again, I'm fine with that. That is a reason for them to fight, that they'd have a personal beef with each other, and a reason for them not to be able to let go of their hatred until Mechagodzilla shows up and they know how to redirect their anger. Good stuff. That is all you needed. And you see how quickly and easily you can come up with that solution? Like, I know we're an hour into this review, but that solution takes 5 minutes to come up with. Gee-ba-liba, gang. Anyways, it's time for my favorite scene in this movie. This is not only one of my favorite scenes in this movie, but this is one of my favorite scenes in the MonsterVerse. A big storm rages on at night, causing Kong to get quite upset, and Gia goes out to comfort him, and they have this beautiful moment. The music is great. I freaking love the song here. It's one of the best ones on the album. The visuals are fantastic. I do think they're the best of the film, and this scene has Kong feel, I would say in some ways, the most like Kong in Kong Skull Island out of the whole rest of the film, and that you get that human connection with him, but you also get the more monstrous and lonely side of him. I think it's really great. It's also a really cool scene because, in a way, while it does all that monstrous stuff with him, makes him seem kind of scary again, it's also the scene that humanizes him more than any other, as this is the first time in Kong's history he's properly, in a film, communicated, which is really cool. I mean, he kind of does in 2005, which is also great, but this film really takes it to the next level. But man, do I love that finger touch moment. The visual is my favorite visual in Godzilla vs. Kong. I think it's beautiful, beautifully shot, great moment. Eileen goes out to get Gia, and she learns that Kong can communicate. She learns that Gia and Kong communicate through ASL in private, but publicly, Kong signs that he wants to go home for the whole world to see. I think that that is such a powerful moment. That is is great. I love it, and it's so tragic to really amplifying Kong's drama here. Such a good scene. Can't really say that about the scene that comes after this, because next up we see Madison piecing together what's going on, including, and it's bizarre to me that they didn't use CGI to fix this or just straight up cut the shot, a conspiracy theory board, or not really a conspiracy theory board, but Madison has been tracking Godzilla's activity, and it's just on screen blatantly that Godzilla has attacked 4 different Apex factories, or I should really specify, there have been 4 Godzilla attacks near Apex facilities, one of which, the most recent one, the 4th attack, was in Pensacola, Florida. This is all carryover from the original version of Godzilla vs. Kong, where the Orca Z was going to be used to get Godzilla to do multiple attacks, really villainizing him to the public, proving that it's not just a one-time fluke, and also I don't think that they were all supposed to be Apex facilities being attacked as much as they were near Apex facilities, making Godzilla look like he had just straight up turned on humanity in general. I actually think that this makes a lot more sense given Mark's motivations, as Mark winds up like so freaked out after the one Godzilla attack. If Godzilla had done one simple attack at Pensacola, Florida's Apex factory, I think Mark Russell, of all people on Earth, would instantly be like, okay, so Apex is up to no good. They're the bad guys. They've done something wrong here. But instead, if Godzilla had done 3 other attacks and only just now attacked an Apex facility, now Mark Russell would be like, oh my god, I don't understand what's going on here. So it's bizarre to me to just straight up leave that on screen, but I guess only people who pause get to notice that. So whatever. She discovers evidence on who the voice of the Titan Truth podcast is and sets out to find him with her friend Josh, who she treats horribly. I don't like the Madison Russell portrayal in this movie. Like I said, don't love the conspiracy angle theory with her, and I really don't like the way she treats Josh. She's just downright a bad friend to him. This actually leads to my least favorite scene in the entire movie, which is when they show up in Chinatown. They go up to this worker in Chinatown and bribe him in order to find out who Bernie is. That scene is very poorly written. It's like boomer dialogue, like making Tide Pod jokes. Tide Pods, that was like a thing when people ate the Tide Pods back in like 2016. This movie came out in 2021. It was already a super dated reference, and it's just so out of touch. I do not like that scene very much. Bernie reluctantly agrees to meet with them after finding out that Madison is Emma Russell's daughter, in one of the moments that I really like between these characters. I love the weight of her being Emma Russell's daughter. That's really good stuff. They devise what I guess we could call a plan to break into Apex's remains, the remains of the Apex facility, and explore sub-level 33. Don't love a lot of this conspiracy theory stuff, and really don't like the way that the two treat Josh. It's also wild to me that the Josh character, played by Julian Dennison, winds up being the straight man in this group, essentially. Like, this kid winds up having to ground the performances between a very amped up Millie Bobby Brown and Brian Tyree Henry at a 10. I very much prefer the way they rein it in for the next movie. I love Bernie in the next film, so it's hard for me to like kind of hold some of that resentment against Bernie, because I'm not the biggest Bernie fan in this movie, but I really like what they do with him next, so I kind of even out on the character overall. I think Bernie works here only because he has the balance of Josh, and I do kind of find some comedy in the fact that for once the kid is the straight man. That is kind of entertaining to me. It's just I think that they take it a little too far, or play it too often, you know? This really gets into like my other big issue with this movie. I know I have so many. I do apologize for that, because I do like this movie quite a lot. It was a huge comfort movie for me when it came out, and it still is, so I feel like I'm being really hard on it, but I do like this movie. This is not the first time this has happened on a Godzilla-Thon. There's been a couple times in Godzilla-Thon when I'm explaining my thoughts on a movie, when I feel like my thoughts are generally kind of negative, or I have a lot of negative thoughts that need elaboration, but I still like the movie, and this is one of those cases. So the other main issue I have with this movie is I just don't like Team Godzilla. I find them to be very boring. It has nothing to do with Godzilla himself. I like Godzilla a lot, and I think he's great in this movie. I actually think Godzilla, when I can set aside the straight up character assassination that happens from the way he left off in King of the Monsters, like just straight up portrayed differently. I'm not even going to get back into it, but characterization wise and power level wise and portrayal, it's all different enough to where if you're truly watching these movies as a writer who's committed to character, you cannot argue with me about it. If you're watching these movies as just a casual movie viewer or someone who's in it for the Godzilla power trip, I can understand why you disagree. That's fine. You're not looking at the movies the same way I am. But anyways, I think Team Godzilla is really lackluster. Like, their plotline is boring. They ultimately accomplish slowing Mechagodzilla down for a couple of seconds, something that doesn't even need to happen. If you just rework that final moment to where Kong catches Mechagodzilla's tail, Godzilla charges the axe, and then Kong goes to town destroying Mechagodzilla, that didn't require Kong catching the tail and struggling with the tail, then Mechagodzilla glitching out for a couple seconds, and then Godzilla charges the axe, and then Kong swings the axe. Like, we don't need that middle bit. It's unneeded drama to give Team Godzilla a purpose, because you know what they accomplished this film? Nothing. They uncover evidence of Mechagodzilla, and it's too late. By the time they discover Mechagodzilla, it's already too late, and Mechagodzilla appears and destroys the world anyways, or destroys Hong Kong, I should say. Like, by the time they learn that Mechagodzilla is even a thing, Mechagodzilla shows himself to the world. They accomplish nothing. We spend the whole movie with them yapping to each other about their silly little apex conspiracy theories. They discover evidence about how Mechagodzilla operates. They discover what Mechagodzilla is, and then Mechagodzilla shows himself, and everybody learns all the information they spent the whole film learning in a matter of seconds, and they don't contribute anything. It's not like they found out a weakness of Mechagodzilla's worth exploiting. It's not like they contribute that information to Monarch. They don't do anything in this movie. That's my big issue with it. They are literally here because I think King Kong versus Godzilla was a split plot line, going between a Godzilla plot and a King Kong plot. Those were two different plot lines in that movie. You know, you had the submarine Seahawk, and then you had the trip to Faroe Island. I think they wanted a similar dual storyline in this film, a Godzilla story and a Kong story, and they don't even really deliver that. They deliver mostly a Mechagodzilla story and a Kong story. Godzilla's kind of ancillary to that. Like, he is the heel of Kong's story and the hero of the Mechagodzilla story, but Godzilla is more of just a vessel for things to occur, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just really don't like the Team Godzilla stuff. I find their dynamic to be kind of annoying. They're always fighting each other and complaining. I don't think that they accomplish a ton. I love the Mechagodzilla stuff. I think it's great. I just wish we had spent more time with Apex or even Monarch uncovering this Mechagodzilla info. If Monarch uncovers this Mechagodzilla info and that's the way you play it, you know, that's our gateway into the Mechagodzilla side of things. It would first of all give the Monarch characters more presence and things to do and make Monarch feel a little more competent. Secondly, it would streamline the story, as now we don't have to do cutaways to Monarch every once in a while. And third, Monarch could come to the discovery of either that Mechagodzilla's eyes create a signal that enrage Godzilla, or whatever your explanation is going to be. And they could also maybe even come up with a signal that blocks Mechagodzilla for a moment, buying Kong time, rather than the silly excuse of pouring alcohol on a computer. Like, that would do anything but short out the computer. How does that computer have anything to do with Mechagodzilla? He's not even operated through that computer. He's operated through Ren Serizawa's booth, which was destroyed because Mechagodzilla no longer needs it. Like, the hell is that computer doing? What is that computer? Was Mechagodzilla like nearly like an inch from destroying himself? If Mechagodzilla had punched that computer stand, which again, he's like inches away from destroying that computer stand when he destroys that headquarters room and kills Simmons, would he have killed himself in the process because somehow unplugging that computer would turn him off? What's the point? It's sloppy. It's so sloppy, and it's only there to give Team Godzilla a purpose because they have none. They don't do nothing. They don't do anything except discover things happening by other characters. Like, they discover that other characters are doing something instead of them. Sorry, getting into a really great sequence here. I really do like this sequence. Again, when I kind of set aside the aspect of how different Godzilla behaves here, which I'm going to try and do mostly for the rest of this review, just because I don't feel the need to harp on it. I've already made that point. So I'm going to try and set that aside and just move along. I love this Tasman Sea section. We catch up in the Tasman Sea. We find out Nathan's basically planning to use Gia to convince Kong to enter Hollow Earth and to find the energy source, which is kind of shady on his part. But again, from his perspective, he really is looking for a tool. He doesn't quite know what the weapon is. He's looking for a weapon that can repel Godzilla. That's all he knows, and he knows Godzilla's on the attack. Again, another reason why maybe a couple more Godzilla attacks could have been cool. Meanwhile, on their voyage, Godzilla appears to kill Kong. Very brutal. Godzilla is on a downright warpath here. The military tries to defend themselves and Kong, and Godzilla retaliates in classic Toho style, destroying their fleet. It is fantastic. The action here is top tier. The visuals are great. I love the sea battle. It's really epic. Godzilla then attacks the Kong transport, flipping the ship. It's this awesome sequence where they're like drowning characters inside. It's flooding. Kong is drowning underneath. Nathan Lind has to then swim to release Kong from his restraints, and he does so just in time for Godzilla to attack him, which means for the first time since 1962, Godzilla and Kong come face to face here. Godzilla starts biting at Kong. Kong grabs him, showing off his incredible strength in an undersea fight, a place King Kong has never been in a fight before. Very cool. I mean, he's fought in the ocean before. He fought a serpent in the ocean before, but a full-on underwater fight with Godzilla is great. Obviously, in King of the Monsters, we learned Godzilla's even stronger underwater, so Kong is at such a disadvantage here, and yet this is one of those moments that shows off a really cool feat where Kong is able to somehow hold back Godzilla from biting and killing him, and I do think Godzilla was like moments away from killing him right here, and Kong's somehow able to hold him back and repel Godzilla, kicking him down so that he can flip the boat back over and catch his breath. It's so cool. One thing I don't love is the Evangelion styled ship hopping where Kong's ship leaps from one to the next to the aircraft carrier. That is universe breaking physics right there, and we have strayed so far from Godzilla 2014 that the MonsterVerse as a whole has officially lost its cohesion in terms of the rules of this universe. Like, that breaks the universe for me. I think that's ridiculous. Does it look cool? Sure. Is that why it was included? Yes, it was included because it looks cool, not because it makes sense. But it leads to a very neat setting, which is that aircraft carrier fight, which I think more interestingly, maybe Kong flips the ship and then swims to the aircraft carrier immediately to get himself more ground, or we explain that the aircraft carrier itself is bigger than normal, specifically in case they needed another transport ship for Kong. You know, some explanation for why these Titans can walk around on a ship, because boy, they're way too large to do so. They'd be sinking that thing so quickly. It's cool. It's a cool fight setting. It's a cool visual. They battle it out on the aircraft carrier. It's sweet. Kong gets up on the aircraft carrier. I love that moment where he throws the plane at Godzilla and Godzilla swims through the explosion. That's really sweet. And then Godzilla swims up and lands on the ship. And I feel like this is officially where round one properly starts, as I understand that it technically starts the moment Godzilla jumps the Kong transport, but I feel like this is really the moment that Godzilla and Kong finally come properly face to face. There's that epic visual where Kong punches Godzilla and Godzilla's like barely phased because he's got that giant tail so he can't fall over. And he slaps Kong. Kong goes down. Kong's about to get beaten up, you know, and then he flips Godzilla off the ship. It's great. I love it. I love that whole moment. The shots are super dynamic with that, like, we kind of like rotate full 360 backwards. It's so cool as Godzilla tail strikes that jet. I don't know. That whole scene just comes across so well here. This is actually one of the best looking Godzilla fights we've ever seen, and it is certainly, by this point, like the second best Kong fight we've ever seen after that V-Rex fight in King Kong 2005. Maybe some of those Kong Skull Island fights. You know what? I don't know why I didn't think of Kong Skull Island's final battle, because that's still like the best Kong choreography we've ever seen. I think that the V-Rex fight with Kong and the three V-Rexes, the Kong versus Skullcrawler final battle, and then Godzilla Kong Hong Kong round 2 are the three best choreographed Kong fights of all time. And this movie actually has some of the best choreographed Godzilla fights of all time as well, and this is one of them. It's super cool. I love that the setting keeps changing too, because like I said, Kong flips Godzilla into the ocean, and then Godzilla charges up and blasts the ship out from underneath Kong, putting him back into the water where the fight continues under the ocean. Super cool as well. It's also cool because in 1962, King Kong and Godzilla continue to fight under the ocean for a while, and that's all off screen. Like, we're just watching the ocean and the earthquake the fight underwater causes. We don't actually see the battle, but here we finally get to see the underwater fight. It's very cool. Depth charges are then used to save Kong's life as Godzilla tries to drag him under the ocean, sinking him to kill him and basically drowning him. It's a great strategy from Godzilla's end here, and the depth charges work. It saves Kong's life, and he surfaces. Nathan Lind and Andrews then order the ships to kill power so that Godzilla thinks everyone is dead, which somehow works. One thing I really love about that is that the military just takes orders from Monarch now. We're past the point where it's like they're arguing and like the military knows better. Take that, Monarch. We're finally at the point where it's like, whatever you say goes, Monarch. You're the ones who know what to do. I love that. I don't understand why the plan works and Godzilla leaves. I get that in the original script, Isa Gonzalez's character was going to have activated the Orca Z, making Godzilla aggressive and having him attack their ships. She turns it off and Godzilla cools down and leaves, believing that he has killed the thing that he was there for, which he doesn't know what he's there for. He goes there because the Orca Z upsets him. He sees Kong and he's like, it's this guy. I gotta kill this guy. She turns the Orca Z off and Godzilla goes, oh, my mission's accomplished, and he leaves. As it plays here, Godzilla's dumb, as I brought up earlier. Like, I can't believe that tricks him. Nathan Lind then comes up with a plan to transport Kong, a new plan, which is not said yet, but, he's like, how's Kong with heights? Teasing what they're gonna do, a throwback to 1962. Meanwhile, Team Godzilla breaks into the Apex headquarters. They discover Sublevel 33 and a futuristic shipping hub. They find this huge futuristic shipping hub. Avoiding getting caught, they climb into one of those shipping containers and discover it's filled with skullcrawler eggs. This is really interesting stuff. I love that they're harvesting skullcrawler eggs. It really brings up questions on like, how do they get the skullcrawler eggs? What do they know about Skull Island? Have they made it to Hollow Earth before? One thing I think would be kind of interesting is if we played with the idea that Apex had already made it to Hollow Earth, but hadn't discovered where the energy source comes from, and that's why they needed a Titan to show them the way, which is a silly thing in the first place. Like, could any Titan have done that? If they brought Scylla down to Hollow Earth, would Scylla have instinctively led them to the Kong temple where the Hollow Earth energy supposedly resides? Like, Hollow Earth energy's everywhere as well. It's what lights the damn place. So that's all silly when you really think about it. As I said, I'm kind of okay just putting the Hollow Earth energy aside and letting that be where the suspension of disbelief comes from. That's fine to me. But I do think the idea that maybe Apex has already made it to Hollow Earth is compelling, because what happens next was the moment in this film where somehow I had made it to this point after, that big aircraft carrier fight. This was the moment that officially destroyed my suspension of disbelief. I was officially out right here in theaters. When I saw this movie for the first time, it was like, are you freaking kidding me? How? Because that little thing is the skullcrawler eggs are loaded up onto this cargo container. They're thrown into a maglev tunnel that blasts them from Florida to Hong Kong. How did Apex build a tunnel from Florida to Hong Kong? One reason I think that maybe if they have already made it to Hollow Earth that's compelling is because this tunnel could run through Hollow Earth. It could use Hollow Earth as a vent to get from one side of the Earth to the next, from Florida to Hong Kong in a really quick amount of time. But instead, it's just an underground tunnel? Are you freaking kidding me? Do you know how hard that would be to build? Do you know how long that would take? They don't even explain it. If they explained later on that the laser beam that they made Mechagodzilla's proton beam from started out as a drill that could drill through rock instantaneously, as we later see the Mechagodzilla beam can do, maybe then I'd be like, okay, at least some thought was put into it. But again, it comes down to my issue of, if I can come up with a solution to this, someone else should have been able to. And the fact that I know nobody has a solution to this just shows that they didn't think about it that hard, which is not how I want my movies to be written. It also frustrates me that they never unpack it. Like, where did they get the skullcrawler eggs? I guess Monarch Legacy of Monsters is finally giving us an answer, but I feel sad that a TV show that's coming out like 5 years later is having to do the heavy lifting for writers that wrote this movie all the way back in 2018 or before. Like, what are we talking about here? How is it that you've had to take this long to come up with an answer, and why doesn't it happen in the movie? Why can't the movie stand on its own properly? The movie should be able to stand on its own with some questions left open intentionally and a lot of questions answered. Like, we should not have this many what ifs or how or why or whatever. Kong is then airlifted to Antarctica. I really like this scene. He lands there, but he refuses to enter Hollow Earth, but you can see he's cold and he's confused, and it's really sad. And it isn't until Gia tells Kong that his family might be inside that Kong instantly takes off towards the Hollow Earth portal, sprinting to find his family, causing Monarch to take off in this emergency heave launch after Kong. It's great. This moment literally made me tear up in theaters because I'm so invested in the MonsterVerse. The second she said your family might be in there and Kong lets out this real sad little roar and takes off running, it immediately brought back memories of Skull Island, The Birth of Kong, back when I think the MonsterVerse was truly at its peak in terms of long-form storytelling, when the comics really mattered and were well done. That is a moment where the comics are not needed, but really enhance your appreciation for a moment in the film, because dang, dude, Kong feeling so lonely. It's already a part of the character. You don't need a comic to understand it, but knowing the backstory of Kong's family being killed in front of him when he was a child, it makes him so much more tragic. It's great. That is something that I really appreciated my deep connection to the MonsterVerse for, because that really enriched that moment for me. I was like immediately brought to tears because of how lonely Kong is. Like, without saying a single word, we see Kong is willing to risk his entire life, potentially throw his life away in an instant, if it means he might be able to find someone else like him. Like, that is so tragic. Kong enters the portal with the heave following, and they are blasted into a vortex heading to the center of the earth. I really like the vortex effects. That looks fantastic. This whole transition sequence is so cool. And they arrive on the other side in Hollow Earth. They have radically changed the way Hollow Earth was working. In Godzilla 2014, and I guess Kong Skull Island is kind of explained as open pockets under the earth where things can live, but are mostly probably like hibernating. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, we're told there's a tunnel system that runs through the earth, and there are some open pockets of that tunnel where things like a giant temple could reside. Here, it's throwing all of that out the window. There's literally a fantasy planet inside of the earth, an entire second planet in the earth where monsters roam. It is a monster planet, or a planet of the monsters. You know, not my favorite, but I understand this is a far, far more usable version. It's essentially similar to Skull Island, except a full kind of like trippy sort of Inception-y world where like the sky is flipped in on itself because they're both technically the ground because it's a circle. It's a, you know, we're inside of the earth. It's a really cool setting. I really like the grittiness of Axis Mundi and Monarch Legacy of Monsters. I love that aesthetic as well, the sci-fi scariness of it. But I do appreciate, from a fantasy standpoint, this is a really cool world. It's really cool to take Kong to a new fantasy world like this. It amps up the Skull Island theme. It's not my cup of tea, you know, it is a little jarring to me to get here from the previous films. It comes out of nowhere for me, big time, I would say, but I can set it aside because of the potential it has to be explored in sequels. I will say I kind of feel like Hollow Earth feels very small in this movie. They traverse it so easily, going from one place to the next. Like, they get around in no time. They make it to the Kong temple so freaking quickly, and then just so happens to be a directly parallel to Hong Kong, you know, like straight line up to the surface to Hong Kong, exactly where they needed it to be. Little ridiculous, more than a little, I would say. And Hollow Earth comes across really small and not very dangerous. Here is the only threat posed in this film is the Warbats. The next film does not fix those issues, as we find out Hollow Earth is still pretty small and not very terrifying. Scar King is a problem, but he comes from the subterranean realm, which is an even more ridiculous concept of a Hollow Earth within the Hollow Earth. What the freaking heck is that? But yep, there sure is a second Hollow Earth inside the Hollow Earth. It's ridiculous. And that's a little more threatening, but even then, it's traversed with more ease than Skull Island is. And I do feel like in the two movies with Hollow Earth, this one and the next one, it never comes across with the presence or fear factor that Skull Island has. It never comes across anywhere near as compelling, threatening, or interesting to me. So it is a little bit of a trade-off where I appreciate the story potential for it. I like the setting, I like the world, I like the visuals. I do find it to be underwhelming compared to Skull Island itself, though. But, you know, I'm a big Skull Island guy, so that might just be a me thing. I know it isn't just a me thing. I've talked to many other people who hold that opinion, but it might not be a very popular opinion. You know what else is also a little world-breaking here, which didn't dawn on me until my most recent watch? I've always thought it was weird that Kong falls through this portal and then crashes into a freaking mountain and is fine. Like, does Kong not take fall damage in the MonsterVerse? But what really dawned on me here, because I've always kind of excused it as two things. Number one, Kong kind of flips his direction, so he hits a point in the earth and then reverses direction and then lands against the mountain. And the mountain, he slides against it, so his momentum is slowed down. He doesn't just smack on the ground. What really struck me is there are two moments that destroy, absolutely destroy the MonsterVerse for me. There is one in King of the Monsters, and there's this one here. There's another one in the next film, but by that point, it's already been established, I guess. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, King Ghidorah grabs Godzilla, brings him up to the stratosphere or beyond, and then drops him to the ground, where he collides with a building. That should have been a death blow, because if Godzilla can be injured by a punch, not a stab, but a punch from a Muto, which we see he is injured from, he cannot survive a fall from essentially space. If Godzilla can survive a fall from the stratosphere or atmosphere or however high up Ghidorah brought him, if he can survive that, he cannot take damage from punches. Nothing. Absolutely nothing King Kong does should be able to impact Godzilla at all. That destroyed the Godzilla vs. Kong fight before it even began. There's no way Godzilla survives that and can be punched and injured. And here, we are told that the core of Hollow Earth has a planet's worth of gravity. A planet's worth. And it can hit you in an instant if you fall into it. And we watch Kong do that. Kong falls through the planet at a speed so fast that he actually travels through a wormhole portal, and he emerges and collides with the gravity vortex in a way that should snap his back like Bane, and in a way where he hits a planet's worth of gravity in the inversion. Dude should be crumpled into dust. God, like, there's no way. And then he flips and smacks into a mountain at super fast speeds. Kong also essentially just survived a fall from the stratosphere right here. Kong also should not be injured by punches. It's really weird to me that the MonsterVerse included that. Like, is there no other way to get them to Hollow Earth? Could Kong not have beamed through the portal and come out rolling on the ground, you know? Like, why did he have to do... Because the fall looks really cool. And it does. It's a great visual. It's super awesome. And it didn't ever stick out to me until right now, because I've always had an issue with the Godzilla fall, and this is one where I'm like, okay, I guess Kong gets a moment like that of his own. So I guess they've both had moments where they've pulled off these insane feats of survival against what essentially should be life-threatening or downright crippling or murderous fall damage. Like, Godzilla and Kong don't take fall damage in the MonsterVerse is what I'm trying to say here. Certainly not in the next movie, because they rocket out of a Hollow Earth portal into the ground and explode so deep into the ground that they literally are submerged in the earth itself and have to come back out of it, erupt from it. Like, these guys don't take fall damage. Anybody who downplays Kong's durability after those two feats is not paying very close attention to how impressive those two moments are. It's so weird. Maybe Hollow Earth portals grant a moment of invincibility as you're respawning. I don't know. Am I overthinking it? Yes, absolutely. That's the entire point. Somebody's got to. Kong lands, he immediately takes off towards the energy source. I guess Nathan Lynn's plan works perfectly in that regard, and the Heaves follow, but they are attacked by the Warbats, which are new creatures. They're like flying king cobra snakes. They're very cool. I love the design. I love them. I think they're fantastic additions to the MonsterVerse. Kong defeats the first one effortlessly. It's a great move. I love the Jason Voorhees styled moment where Kong smacks one of their dead bodies into the other one, but then he's constricted by the second one. Now, I personally think it's just because Kong was like unaware of how these things fight. He's never really had to fight one of these things before, so it's not like he'd know its moves. It is unfortunate though, because the heave is what shoots the missiles that gets it to relax its grip on Kong, allowing him to also he kills it pretty effortlessly as well, crunching it before slamming it into the ground and eating its head. Pretty brutal, or at least eating the insides of its head. But it does build up this like notion that has become a little frustrating in the fan base. It's one of those things where the fan base itself has made this moment more of a thing than it needs to be, and caused a lot of headaches over it, where it's like, Kong's constantly getting saved in this movie. He can't do anything without getting saved. Godzilla's going to atomic breath him on the ship, and the only reason he doesn't is because Godzilla gets shot in the back by a missile. Godzilla's going to drown Kong at sea, but the only reason he doesn't is because of the depth charges. Kong couldn't even take on the Warbats on his own, and he'll need help later. It downplays all of these Kong moments, and it's silly because Godzilla has equally as many throughout King of the Monsters and Godzilla 2014. Equally as many. Like, Godzilla would be toast in both of those films without the humans' help. But it's like, why is it needed? Why not just give Kong a cool little action sequence where he can fight the snakes on his own? I guess because the humans would theoretically respond in this instance. And I guess I do appreciate that. Like, they immediately rush to his help and they're not wasting any time. But it does feel like a moment where, a bit of a missed opportunity to have Kong take on these Warbats on his own, and to find a really creative way to get out of that. Like, I think it could have been cool if the Warbat tries to constrict Kong, but his wing wraps around his mouth, and then his teeth sink through it, you know, and he eats a chunk of it out and tears his way through the wing. Something crazy like that would have been awesome. And then just like that, after taking a couple bites of dinner, Kong resumes his mission in Hollow Earth. He comes across a gravity inversion point, another one, like the exact center of the Hollow Earth where gravity is equal from one side to the next, and it is such a cool moment. I love this. As Kong's taken off running through the open landscape of Hollow Earth, you feel like it's the first time he's ever gotten to fully run at full speed and like really stretch himself. It's this really freeing moment. As he's running up this mountain, he passes a bunch of rock critters which wake up. I like the you know, just adding more monsters to the Hollow Earth, and one of them is eaten by this goofy little Godzilla-esque lizard, which Adam Wingard named Doug, and Doug has taken on a fan base of his own, become so popular, gotten a spin-off comic, gotten plushies made. He's even appeared in the next film for a cameo as well. He's gotten toys of him. Good for you, Doug. Doug is one of those things that, like, I didn't think much of. I kind of liked him before he had a name. You know, I liked before we named him, but whatever. He became so popular. He became more popular than Barb ever did. Barb was the female Muto from King of the Monsters. You know, Barb, everyone thought that was a funny name, making the Muto named Barb, or naming the Ghidorah's left head Kevin, you know, and now we've got Doug to add to the trio. Anyways, it leads to one of my favorite moments in this whole movie, as Kong discovers the leaping point with this giant carved hand reaching out to him. It's like biblical in nature. It's so cool. I love the floating blue stones. He leaps through the anti-gravity field with this Blade Runner type music playing. It is the downright best music Junkie XL does for this film. I know I like that intro theme a lot. It's definitely the best iteration of the Godzilla and Kong themes, but man is this cool. I love the anti-gravity music. Have no clue why it wasn't released on the album, because it's fantastic. And apparently Adam Wingard has said originally the score for this movie was actually a lot more like this the whole time. Originally it was supposed to be kind of John Carpenter inspired. I would have loved that, you know, but I think they wanted to save the futuristic sound for Hollow Earth itself, and this is a great moment. It's so beautiful. I love this whole sequence. Kong reaches out, he touches the rock on his way down. It's so good. And then he lands and he resumes his search. Great stuff. The Apex cargo is then delivered to Hong Kong what appears to be hours later. Again, have no freaking clue how they were able to travel the Earth that fast, but they sure were. And Team Godzilla kind of wanders around the Apex facility until just so happening to come upon an enormous execution chamber where a gargantuan-sized mech rises up from the ground into the room. So awesome here. Love this moment. Walter Simmons activates a neural link with Ren Serizawa, who takes control, piloting Mechagodzilla, who rises up. Love Mechagodzilla's whole presence here. Love the roar. The design isn't my favorite. It's one of my least favorite Mechagodzillas, I would say. Like, I don't know where I'd necessarily rank him without thinking about it too hard. As far as Mechagodzillas go, Kiryu is my favorite, and then probably 75 or 74. Those two are great, you know. I love the Showa Mechagodzilla, love Kiryu. I really like the Ready Player One Mechagodzilla, which was also designed by Jared Krzyzewski, who designed this Mechagodzilla as well, but this one's not my favorite, and it's mostly just the face. I think the face is a little too turtle-esque. I like the kind of skeletal aspect of him, but he is a little over-designed. He's a little busy, but I do like how many like spinning components and parts there are. I love how much weaponry there is that you don't even notice. His fingers have blades on them. His tail's a blade. Everything's a weapon. He feels very dangerous. I love the roar. The roar is fantastic. It's a peak Mechagodzilla roar. Might be my favorite Mechagodzilla roar. I think it's great. And then a Godzilla-sized skullcrawler, which has a red back for some reason, breaks into the room. It's released, they release it for testing. It nearly kills Team Godzilla, but is caught by Mechagodzilla, who unleashes a proton laser into the Skullcrawler's throat, which mirrors the kiss of death in this twisted and evil way. And then Mechagodzilla splits the Skullcrawler in half with the laser, bifurcating it. It's the coolest fatality in this movie, one of the coolest in the entire MonsterVerse. Awesome that it's a Mechagodzilla kill as well, coming midway through the movie. It's just very epic. The whole scene is great. The colors are great. The music is great. This is the best iteration of the Godzilla theme in the movie other than the intro. It's funny to me that Junkie XL wrote the intro Godzilla theme, which is like a rip-off Ifukube theme. Meanwhile, he actually delivers a very original and cool Mechagodzilla theme, which is also part of the Godzilla theme here. That is cool, man. And it comes across so well in this scene. It's a little different than the other Godzilla theme. It's very different than Ifukube's Godzilla theme. This is the cooler Godzilla theme for sure. And it's funny because this is also another song that's not on the dang album, as most of the best music in this movie isn't. Mechagodzilla then powers down Dad after only reaching 40% power due to a lack of that Hollow Earth energy needed to power him up. Madison realizes that this is what Godzilla's been after. This is what he's been so upset about, the fact that they're trying to replace him. And it's like, this is information that Monarch could have learned. We could have just straight up cut away to Apex and found out about this point in the movie that this is what they've been working on anyways, and found out that, you know, Monarch is still figuring this out. They're behind the times, whatever. I don't know why Team Godzilla needed to be the ones here to figure that out, but they sure are. Mechagodzilla's eye then blinks that Orca signal, which is no longer an Orca signal, and it gets Godzilla's attention, who he straight up beelines it for Hong Kong, where Mechagodzilla is. Monarch tracks Godzilla's turn, and Mark, what are you doing, man? First of all, Mark, what are you actually doing? If you look at his texts, they're bizarre. He's texting two unknown numbers, and they're like kind of flirty and sexual. Like one of them's even got the drooling emoji. Mark Russell, what are you doing? What a weird inclusion in this movie. Was that like a visual joke that they didn't think anybody would pause that to notice? And also, Mark, buddy, what are you doing? Are you not in charge? He's called Director Russell here, but he really doesn't seem to have much authority at all, because like, does he not have the ability to call for an evacuation of Hong Kong with Godzilla heading there like straight up? I guess not, because all he does is try to contact Madison but fail. He can't contact her, and so he leaves for his transport to Hong Kong to find out what Godzilla's up to. In Hollow Earth, however, we get to another one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I love this. Kong passes the remains of a bunch of statues of his people and comes upon a temple with an enormous handprint on the door, mirroring Kong's Skull Island, maybe setting up for Scar King, I guess technically, although I truly do not think that's what this movie had in mind, but you know, we'll pretend they did. And Kong enters this temple. I love this. It's the first time he's found anything of his own species, like the first time he's seen any of their creations, their society, their history. It's so cool. And he calls out searching for his people. It's great. He finds this Titan-sized throne is so epic, and this axe made from the body parts of a Godzilla. It's lodged into a giant skull, which I'll point out to you guys, that skull is supposed to intended to be a Godzilla skull. It even lines up with the fact that in Godzilla 2014 they use a bear skull to represent Godzilla's skull, and this is a bear skull. I think it's because they didn't actually have a CGI model for a Godzilla skull, and they didn't think anybody would question it all that much, but people sure have. The implication here, though, is that it was a Godzilla slaying weapon, a weapon meant to kill Godzillas, and that you're supposed to see visual proof of that here. The axe can kill a Godzilla. It's lodged in the skull of a giant bear titan that is, it's supposed to be Godzilla. It's supposed to be a Godzilla skull. Kong rips the axe out, and now he's got this royal axe of his people. It's unearned. He didn't earn it. He didn't do anything to earn that. I wish he did, but he doesn't. Either way, doesn't take away from how amazing this moment is, and I do like the fact that it's essentially Kong's lineage passing on a final weapon, a final thing to defend himself against Godzilla. Like, it's the last gift of his people before he finds them again. It's really cool from that perspective, so I'll stand by it, and I'll defend it. I think it's very cool. I love the royal axe. I love this moment. I love when Kong raises it into the air and roars and then sits on the throne room. The music in this scene is fantastic. The song Hollow Earth ends with that amazing Kong motif, and the super cool throne room song, The Throne. Those are the two best pieces of music in this film from this soundtrack, from the actual score that's out there. They're great. They're really, really great. I love this whole scene, and it feels like Kong has officially visually earned the title of King Kong, the way that Godzilla earns the title of King of the Monsters at the end of the last film, with that actual visual of the monsters bowing to Godzilla. Meanwhile, Team Godzilla sneaks around Apex and stumbles upon Ghidorah's skull, transformed here into an operating chamber for Ren Serizawa. Absolutely no acknowledgement of Alan Jonah or how Apex wound up with the skull, straight up not addressed in this movie even a little bit. Somehow, I don't know why, but Serizawa is still uplinked with Mechagodzilla, so they get to kind of wander around, and Bernie theorizes that there is a second Ghidorah skull inside of Mechagodzilla. Now, I think from the script standpoint, there is supposed to be a second Ghidorah skull in the head of Mechagodzilla, but Adam Wingard has admitted outright that that's a mistake. It's just a continuity error. Like, Bernie Hayes has to be wrong, because as we see in Godzilla King of the Monsters, the other Ghidorah skulls are outright vaporized, destroyed by Godzilla, so therefore there's only one left. And unfortunately, that just means Bernie's wrong, which calls into question how much else is he wrong about, but that's for videos that I've also done on the channel that you can go watch. Either way, Godzilla arrives in Hong Kong. Again, setting aside my feelings on Godzilla's actions, I love the fact that we get a Hollywood budget Godzilla destruction scene with a Toho style. It's not as far as Toho would take it for sure, but it's cool. Godzilla arrives in Hong Kong, destroying this bridge on his way in and rampaging through the streets. Mark arrives at about the same time and learns that Monarch's other director has only just now initiated an evacuation. Like, bro, what have you been waiting for? People are dying because of you. Kong's axe magically lights up. I guess somehow, some way, it being on the floor next to the Hollow Earth source wasn't good enough for it. It needed to be at the throne itself, but the axe lights up, and I like this moment because Kong uses visual cues alone, his perception, something that this movie doesn't use enough of, to figure out what this thing is. He finds that there is an altar on the ground of other Godzilla axes, other weapons harvested from dead Godzillas, and he places the axe in the only open slot needed, and it winds up starting a chain reaction that pulls all this Hollow Earth energy from the core into the axes, charging them. It charges this whole Godzilla altar, like there's literally a Godzilla like essentially carved into the ground here, and our Godzilla on the surface feels it and responds to it by supercharging and blasting the ground with his atomic breath in the most, I know there's been a couple of them, but this is the most world-breaking thing that happens in the MonsterVerse downright. We find out here that Godzilla has an atomic drill that can drill to the Hollow Earth in a matter of what appears to be minutes for the atomic breath to drill to the Hollow Earth, and yet it can't kill a Muto? Oh, but Godzilla was underpowered. Shut up, and why don't you watch some of my lore videos? No, it wasn't. Can't kill Ghidorah, and it cannot kill Kong later. Is that because Godzilla wasn't fully charged? Well, tell that to the supercharged Godzilla in the next film, who also couldn't kill Scar King with an even stronger beam. It makes no sense. The only explanation that I can headcanon into existence is that we have kind of altered the way we view Godzilla's atomic breath here to say maybe the reason Godzilla has it in the first place is for the purpose of it being a drill for the Godzilla species to make it in and out of Hollow Earth, and maybe the fact that Godzilla's atomic energy is so similar to Hollow Earth energy means that the closer the atomic breath gets to Hollow Earth, the more powerful it gets, and therefore it will be able to, as it's drilling through the rock and it starts to soak up some of that Hollow Earth radiation, it will amplify, which would explain why the hole on the other end of Hollow Earth is bigger than the hole on the surface. Like Godzilla, the hole he burns on the surface is not as big as the hole in Hollow Earth, and it would make sense under the perspective of Godzilla's atomic breath is one thing, but it being amplified by the ground, the Hollow Earth energy in the ground, is a totally different beast, and maybe that means that Godzilla's atomic breath would be stronger in the Hollow Earth. I don't know, because they don't know either. It is so ridiculous. I think it'd be easier to just explain there was an unactivated Hollow Earth portal nearby, and something Godzilla does, or Kong, or whoever, maybe Kong starting this chain reaction, opens the portal, and the portal could either open directly to Hong Kong or could open to the bay, whatever. All you needed to say was that Kong starts a chain reaction that opens an unactivated portal. As we learn in the next movie, they can be turned on and off. So I know I'm overthinking it. I know, I'm sorry. I do love the visual of Godzilla's atomic drill. I love how supercharged he gets. It's so cool. Maya Simmons then scans the energy source and sends a sample to Apex. I think it's funny that Eileen protests. Like, did you not know they were going to do that? That Nathan wasn't shy about that. That we've been saying it the whole time. I don't know why she's like, hey, you can't do that. What'd you think they were here for? That's exactly what they were here for. Unfortunately for Maya, though, the Apex guards hold Eileen and the others at gunpoint because Maya's trying to simmer them down, and Kong does not take kindly to this. He roars in retaliation just as an earthquake hits this temple, which is caused by Godzilla's atomic breath. Then a swarm of hellhawks from the ceilings, these monster bird things, drop down and start to attack. Maya flees as Apex successfully synthesizes the energy output and sends it up to Mechagodzilla, amplifying him. Up on the surface, Ren Serizawa protests because it is dangerous. They've never tested this before, and it's a pretty reckless thing to just turn this on. We don't know what it'll do. Meanwhile, Walter Simmons is like, shut up, dude, forces him into Mechagodzilla with a little Evangelion reference, get in the goddamn robot. And our finale is off. Team Kong is nearly killed by the Hellhawks, but they're saved last second as Godzilla's atomic breath breaches the temple. One thing that I wish happened here is that in the original script, Godzilla jumps into Hollow Earth to fight Kong and stop him from getting the axe. Like, Godzilla does not want Kong to have this axe, and so he directly jumps to Hollow Earth to battle him, and there's a huge fight in this temple, and they wind up dragging it back up onto the surface, which would have been cool, as I'll talk about here in the end. I wish we had more Godzilla and Kong fighting, but this is still great. It's great the way it happens. Godzilla and Kong roar at each other from across the planet. It's a little silly, like obviously they don't know each other's on the other side, but they're just roaring at these holes. But it is a cool visual. But then Maya opens fire on Kong trying to escape to the surface through the newly opened portal, and Kong is not having it. He grabs the heave, and I really love that he checks to see who's inside, determining it's not his friends, and then destroys it because he's sick of them. I love that. That's great. The temple then completely crumbles into pieces. It's brutal. It's kind of a hard thing to overlook too. It makes Godzilla pretty unsympathetic that the moment Kong finds a home, Godzilla destroys it. Like Kong can't be happy anywhere. It's ridiculous. But I understand Godzilla doesn't technically know what's going on down there. He just knows that the energy source was activated. Enraged, Kong grabs the axe and jumps upward towards the surface for revenge, and we are off to the final battles. Or at least to the Godzilla vs. Kong fight, which is the main event, despite the fact that there's all that Mechagodzilla stuff afterward. Team Kong follow Kong upward in a heave, and Team Godzilla is caught and arrested snooping around Ghidorah's skull, not very sneakily at all. This gets into my favorite scene in this movie by far, and my favorite fight scene of Phase 1 of the MonsterVerse. Really, it's actually my favorite fight scene of the MonsterVerse overall. I love it. This leads to the best part as Kong surfaces and calls Godzilla out and then launches an attack on him. This leads to the best choreographed fight maybe in any of these Godzilla films ever. It is truly fantastic. It's at the very least the best fist-to-fist fighting we ever see, and it is a downright shame because the actual fist-to-fist battle between Godzilla and Kong only lasts for a whopping 48 seconds. 48 seconds. After that 48 seconds from when Kong launches his first attack on Godzilla onward for the rest of round 2, it's just a beam chase where Godzilla's chasing Kong around with the beam, which I understand is part of the broader action sequence, but it is not combat. It is not combat. It is not a fight scene anymore. It transitions from a fight scene to a chase scene. And I need more fighting because if there's one thing Adam Wingard knows how to do, it is deliver a spectacular fight. Like, holy crap, I'm left wanting so much more. It's amazing. Godzilla and Kong going at it in such a brutal way with some incredible combo moves. It's so sick. I love Kong jumping off the building, using the building as a leaping point to punch Godzilla in the face. I freaking love the drop kick. That is so awesome. Obviously, Godzilla got his own drop kick in the 1962 film. And then Kong winds up doing the thing. He winds up grabbing the axe, and as Godzilla's charging up his mouth about to blast Kong with the atomic breath, Kong shoves it down his mouth like the 1962 tree moment. It's iconic. I got so hyped in theaters, I was literally bouncing up and down in my chair from excitement as that happened, and I still get so hyped to this day with that. An incredible way to work that reference into this movie. It was so amazing. And I love the fact that we get to see Kong is a really efficient and really trained fighter here. I think this is what this movie needed more of, was this up close fist-to-fist fighting, because it is perfect. It excels at it. Unfortunately, though, Godzilla blasts Kong backwards. Kong falls over, which I do like. It gives Kong a moment to figure out how the axe works, that it charges up from Godzilla's atomic breath. But then Kong loses the axe immediately because he slices it into Godzilla's leg, doing some major damage. That's probably the most damage he technically does to Godzilla. But Godzilla just grabs the axe and hucks it to the side. And then he chases Kong around and we lose it. We just lose the fight. I do love this whole round 2 sequence. I love this chase. I think the visuals are amazing. I love that shot looking upward as Kong's climbing across the building. We're at the human perspective and the beam is chasing behind him. It explodes through the buildings. I love the beam effect here, the way that when it collides with things, it explodes into purple smoke. All of it is awesome. It's so cool. And Godzilla, he looks fantastic here. He's never looked cooler. We also get to see Kong doing some great acrobatics swinging around. I just wish there was more fist-to-fist fighting because that's it. We're already over with it. It's already done. We get this interlude where we cut to the heave surfacing and they kind of escape Godzilla's atomic breath here. And I don't consider that part of the fight scene. It's like when you cut to like a helicopter in King Kong vs. Godzilla 1962 and the human characters are looking down at what's going on. Like, that's a cutaway to the human side of things. It does break the combat. I've never had an issue with that, as you know from my last review. I don't have an issue with us breaking the combat, but what I want, and as you'll see, is I'm left wanting so much more Godzilla and Kong fighting because, oh my god, Adam Wingard knows what he's doing with it, and that's why I really would have liked that third fight in Hollow Earth where they fight down there in the throne room. I just wish we could have seen more of it. It's too entertaining to not get more of. Because from here, after that little interlude with the humans surfacing, Kong's able to recover his axe. I do love that he uses that building as a shield to deflect the atomic breath. That is really what we needed more of, was playing to their strengths and weaknesses like what I was talking about way at the start of this review. But then he grabs the axe, charging it with the atomic breath. It's able to direct the atomic breath upwards towards it, and then he slams it down on Godzilla's face, exploding it against Godzilla, knocking Godzilla out cold. It's great. Kong winds up being the winner of round 2, and it's an incredibly engaging fight. Then we cut away and we find out that Team Godzilla is taken to Walter Simmons directly, who reveals his plan to kill the Titans with Mechagodzilla. Like, we already know that. He doesn't need to reveal that to them, but he goes on a little villainous monologue about how his plan is to make humanity the apex species again and whatever. Meanwhile, Godzilla wakes back up and goes full animalistic to hunt Kong down. And while I do really love the visuals of Godzilla going full animalistic, crawling around and all this, this is such a brief fight, but it's still super cool. I just wish it lasted longer. Kong sneak attacks Godzilla. It's a great moment where he tricks Godzilla into thinking he's behind him, and then he slams him into a building. Super awesome. I also love the visual of Kong up on that sort of Empire State Building looking building. But round 3 is so brief. Kong gets like 3 good hits in, and then it's over. Godzilla bodies Kong, grabs him, flips him off of him, swings him around, dislocates his shoulder. Kong barely does anything here, and it's like not even satisfying from Godzilla's perspective, because we don't even get to see him go toe-to-toe for a while. It's just over so quickly. Godzilla goes on this close range offensive, dislocating Kong's shoulder like I said, sucking his toes, literally putting his toes in his mouth, disgusting and degrading Godzilla, and then scratching up Kong's chest before stomping him into the ground and roaring in his face. It's an incredibly iconic moment where Kong roars back, super cool visual, and Godzilla seems to agree, as it seems to gain Godzilla's respect. And I would think Godzilla would be the kind of guy to charge up his atomic breath and just obliterate Kong's face here, killing him outright, or stomp straight through his chest and kill him, as I actually do believe in the original first draft of the script, which I'm glad they moved away from. Before they did their first batch of rewrites, I think Godzilla was supposed to cave in Kong's chest and kill him here, and I'm glad they move away from that. They do move away from that. That is one of the best changes they made. One of the best things they did was sparing Kong, because they knew that he's too compelling to kill outright like that. It's too disrespectful to the legacy of the character, and it's also unearned, I would say. But Godzilla seems to gain Kong's respect because he doesn't kill him outright. He spares him. He gets off of him and walks away. It seems Godzilla appreciates that Kong is defiant to the very end. And as Godzilla leaves, Kong passes out. And uh-oh, Godzilla, your fight's not over, because Mechagodzilla activates, but with the Hollow Earth energy, which actually triggers Ghidorah's skull into merging with Mechagodzilla's AI, electrocuting Ren Serizawa and killing him. He is dead here, and hijacking Mechagodzilla, who then destroys the control room, killing Walter Simmons and a bunch of the Apex people in the process. I do love the idea that Ghidorah's basically consciousness possesses Mechagodzilla. It's a cool way to call back to Kiryu. It's also just a neat way to get like some sort of a Ghidorah consciousness back in this movie, but I wish it was made a little more clear that Mechagodzilla is not the reincarnation of Ghidorah, but instead a new hybrid AI Ghidorah evil thing completely. It's its own thing. Like, it does rob Mechagodzilla a little bit of some agency to say Mechagodzilla is essentially Ghidorah piloting a mech suit, which isn't the truth. It is its own thing, you know, it is its own thing. I think just most people don't pay attention to that because the Ghidorah skull seems to take over. And with that, Ren Serizawa and Walter Simmons are dead. Mechagodzilla erupts from the mountain he was built in this super awesome moment, kind of calling back to that 74 film, and then his rampage is quick but epic. I love him lasering through the city, I love him stomping the buildings, I love the visuals here, and I really love the Godzilla fight. Godzilla goes to combat him, he sprints at him in one of the coolest Godzilla visuals in the movie. I love Mechagodzilla opening up all the missiles on Godzilla, who charges through them all, and then Godzilla gets the absolute smackdown put on him. It's the most entertaining fight in the MonsterVerse aside from that round 2 Hong Kong fight, if nothing else from the perspective of at every turn Godzilla is countered and absolutely humiliated. I know there's a lot of cope in this fandom that it's because Godzilla was tired from his fight. The film does a very bad job portraying that on screen. Never one time in the entire film do you get the idea that Godzilla is low on stamina, as Godzilla is presented as sprinting at full speed, having full range of his emotions. It's not like he's tired at all in this moment. He's got his full atomic breath charge up. There's never a moment where we kind of get the impression that Godzilla's worn out from his fight. That's just cope started by the fan base that Adam Wingard embraced because you guys were sending him death threats because you guys are insane. I'm not coping though. Godzilla gets humiliated by Mechagodzilla because that's the point of Mechagodzilla. The whole point ever since the first introduction in 1974 was that Mechagodzilla is the superior Godzilla, and Godzilla has to outsmart him to take him down, or team up with others, whatever. And in this case, it's Kong. Team Kong discovers that Kong is dying. Godzilla did too good of a job beating his butt, and Kong's gonna die, so they have to use a heave to revive him, kind of a callback to the 1962 film. And with Kong revived, Gia explains that Mechagodzilla is the enemy and not Godzilla, and Kong's like, oh man, he reluctantly agrees to fight with Godzilla, and he fixes his shoulder by slamming himself into a building, and then he runs to save Godzilla, and he does seconds before Godzilla's killed with his own kiss of death. Mechagodzilla's about to beam straight down Godzilla's throat and kill him, and Kong saves his life. The Titans then unite to take down Mechagodzilla in a very brief but amazing 2v1. I love the team up. I love them grabbing different arms of Mechagodzilla and slamming him through the building. I love that moment where Godzilla's taking on one arm of Mechagodzilla and Kong climbs the other to smack Mechagodzilla around. It's so cool. I actually think it's a cooler team up than what we get in the next film. Godzilla winds up getting knocked down while Kong turns to grab the axe so that he can change the tides of the fight here. And unfortunately, Kong winds up getting stuck in a stalemate with Mechagodzilla because while he can do some damage with the axe, he cannot get out of this tricky little situation where Mechagodzilla's tail is about to drill through his face. And despite the fact that Mechagodzilla can open up, I don't know, any number of weapons against Kong to get out of this, like his hands, he can drill into Kong with his hands, he can slice through him with the hand saws, he can shoot his proton beam down Kong's face to kill Kong, he can shoot missiles at Kong to get Kong to loosen his grip. Despite all of that, Mechagodzilla's committed to killing Kong with his tail. Why, you might ask? Well, it's because I was saying earlier, they needed an excuse for Team Godzilla to do absolutely anything in this movie, and so they do. Team Godzilla starts shouting at each other, and then Josh takes some alcohol from Bernie Hayes and pours it on Mechagodzilla's computer hub, causing it to glitch out and explode. I don't know how whiskey does that, but the whiskey causes the computer to glitch. It buys Kong enough time so that Godzilla charges up the axe with his atomic breath. I love that team up moment. I love seeing Godzilla use his intelligence for once. And then Kong uses the supercharged axe to absolutely dismantle Mechagodzilla, cutting him into pieces, getting covered in oil. He looks fantastic. Kong is so cool here. And then he decapitates Mechagodzilla in a callback to the ending of the 1974 film. It's so epic. I also love that, as Adam Wingard always says, Godzilla wins the fight, but Kong wins the movie. And you have to, because otherwise this movie is a really bizarre, weirdly written, kind of sad film about a guy who loses his house, gets absolutely annihilated due to a hate crime, finds a new house, gets his house firebombed by a racist, goes to the surface to get revenge, and then that racist beats him up and kills him. That's the movie if Kong doesn't defeat Mechagodzilla. So I love that Godzilla and Kong can put their differences aside and team up and fight Mechagodzilla, and that Kong is the one who gets the win here. It's absolutely needed from a narrative standpoint. In the aftermath here, Team Kong is reunited here, and there's a little fake out with a Godzilla vs. Kong round 4 in another one of my favorite little visuals. I love the way Kong looks here as he gets up to fight Godzilla one last time. I also love the way he kind of drops the Mechagodzilla head and falls over like a tired gunslinger, and the way Godzilla charges Kong here at the very end of the movie is really menacing. It's fantastic. In the end though, Godzilla's not here for a fight. Madison winds up reuniting with Mark just in time for all of this to go down, and they run over as Godzilla and Kong roar at each other and go their separate ways. It's also the only time in the entire movie that Team Kong and Team Godzilla are on screen together, and they never exchange any dialogue. They don't even acknowledge each other's existence. Godzilla simply tells Kong to drop the axe, he's not here to fight, and the two of them roar at each other, and then they go their separate ways. Godzilla leaves into the ocean, and Kong survives to fight another day. It seemed more thematically appropriate when the movie ended with them on equal terms as former enemies who have now gained the respect of each other, but the next film undoes that. So it's just simply that Kong survives to fight another day and Godzilla leaves because he's too sleepy to fight here. This is really because Godzilla is essentially like, dude, go to Hollow Earth, I'll leave you alone. I don't want to deal with you. If you go to Hollow Earth, we're good. We're good. Just don't come back here again, or we will have problems. Which is never really how I interpreted the end of this movie, but I don't know, I didn't make it. I just watched it more times than most people on the planet. In the end of the movie, I love that we return to Hollow Earth. Monarch has returned to Hollow Earth. They've started to build a Hollow Earth station down there, and Kong shows up and tells Gia that he is finally home. And then he sets out swinging for the last time, roaring on a mountain as the king of the Hollow Earth. I love that Kong gets the last line of this movie. It's the only instance in a kaiju film that the kaiju gets the last line that I can think of. It's really cool. I really love it. So epic. As you can tell, this movie's kind of a mixed bag for me. On the one hand, like, I don't know, it's got some painful missed potential. I think a lot of this is due to simply a lack of confidence. I think there's a lack of confidence in the initial premise of having King Kong and Godzilla fight each other, and straight up, I think there's a lack of confidence in the MonsterVerse itself after King of the Monsters box office. What I believe happened here is I don't think somebody had full confidence in the idea of King Kong and Godzilla fighting. And Adam Wingard's not shy about admitting that he didn't think that Kong could stand a chance to Godzilla, so maybe it was him. I mean, he's openly admitted that he found it to be a really big challenge to get Kong to fight Godzilla on equal grounds in this movie, and that's one of the reasons the axe was included. I think that's a really silly reason. I think the 1962 film already proved you can just have them be on equal grounds as each other. I understand that film gives Kong a very silly power-up with the lightning abilities. I don't think this movie needed to go that route. It could have, but I don't think it needed to. I just simply think you portray Kong as being a powerful opponent, different to Godzilla, different in ways that make him an equal. The same way that the Mutos were able to put the smackdown on Godzilla, Kong could have done the same. I also think it's silly because in the entire history of Godzilla, that's never really been an issue before. How is Ebra an even match with Godzilla? He isn't, but a movie will treat him like he is one. Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster puts Godzilla up against Ebra as the main threat, and we just live with it. You know, you got Son of Godzilla, which puts Godzilla up against a lot of lesser opponents, and Godzilla struggles to overcome Kamunga. There are plenty of Godzilla films where Godzilla struggles to go up against an opponent, and we're totally fine with that. We just accept it and move on. And this is just a case where I don't think you had to overthink it. I think this movie overthought the premise. I think this movie went, a big monkey versus Godzilla, how could he win? And it overthought the premise and over-convoluted it. That's the thing. I think this movie did not have confidence in the idea of King Kong and Godzilla fighting, and I understand neither did Ishiro Honda all the way back in 1962, but I still think there's a lot of potential there if you play the characters right. And I think that the fact that King of the Monsters kind of underperformed, they didn't want to tie this movie so heavily to a movie that not everybody saw, that this movie underwent so many script revisions and wound up with what I consider to be a kind of a lackluster final script. I'm not even saying the movie came out lackluster, but the script came out lackluster, and it holds the whole movie back. This movie has downright bad world building. It takes away some of the most interesting things of Kong from the previous film, from Kong Skull Island, some of the most compelling traits of that character. Downright character assassination from Mark Russell. It radically alters Godzilla's characterization in a very frustrating way. It does not seem to understand what makes the idea of the Godzilla versus Kong fight compelling. It isn't that Kong has an axe, it's that Kong is a different type of character. Kong has more fist-to-fist combat strength than Godzilla. He has less durability. He has more intelligence. He has more speed. He has less hacks. You know, Godzilla's got the atomic breath. They have different strengths and weaknesses. Godzilla's got the gills that are a weak point, the eyes that are a weak point. There's so many other things you could have done with it. And even in the comic books where we find out you can neutralize Godzilla's atomic breath by breaking his spines. Let's just take a look at the MonsterVerse itself. Muto Prime breaks Godzilla's spines and disables his atomic breath. We already have established strengths and weaknesses for this characters. So the fact that this movie shies away from all of them and comes up with new ones is bizarre to me. As far as this movie's concerned, the characters' strengths and weaknesses just simply depend on the scene at hand and what they need to accomplish in that scene. This movie is one that I can't really go through my 4 quadrants of human story, kaiju story, soundtrack, and special effects, which is a very, very limited and outdated way I ranked movies. I was not thinking about them very deeply back in the day when I came up with that rating system, but obviously I'll move away from that if I re-review these films. I'm going to have to add some categories here to explain my full thoughts on this movie. For the human story, it is broken down into a few components. Monarch is downright bad. I think it's downright bad. Apex and Team Godzilla, I think, is not that good, but also Apex is pretty solid, actually. So I would say Team Godzilla is not great. Apex is pretty good. Team Kong, though, I think the Team Kong stuff actually is great. I think it's really great. I think it does work. Overall, I think it evens out to good. It's a good human story. There's a lot of good characters in this movie, and a lot of stuff I like with the humans. The kaiju story is where this movie really shines. It goes the route that I really wanted it to, the route that King Kong versus Godzilla goes, the route that War of the Gargantuas goes, and that's making the kaiju the main characters. We understand that it's their story, and we're going to give them the most compelling drama, and that's really cool. The Godzilla story I find frustrating because of how it ties into the previous films and the previous characterization for Godzilla, but setting that aside, very good. I really like the use of Godzilla here as this ultimate overpowering threat. It's pretty great. Kong, I think, is downright fantastic. I think it's a downright fantastic storyline for Kong. I love that he has a full arc. I love that he learns things. I love that everything changes for him by the end. I love how much change Kong undergoes. I do think the way we get here, it's a big leap from Kong Skull Island to here, but with the Kong we have on hand here, it's pretty great. Mechagodzilla is pretty good. He comes out of absolutely nowhere. This movie doesn't earn him at all, but this movie doesn't earn a lot of its big world-building jumps. Mechagodzilla comes out of absolutely nowhere here, but he's still portrayed very well. He's downright scary. I love how menacing he is. I love how powerful he is against Godzilla. It's awesome. The music here is okay. Some of the music is great. I shouted out all of the tracks that I think are great. That A New Language song is fantastic when Kong speaks for the first time. The Hollow Earth is great. The Throne is great. The intro theme is great. The Anti-Gravity song is great. I also really love the song Mega as Godzilla and Kong are fighting. That's all great. I've talked about this at length on the channel over time. I will not spend too much time harping on it, but I consider Godzilla's theme to be straight up academic plagiarism of the work of Akira Ifukube, and I find it very frustrating that they actually have the ability to license Akira Ifukube's Godzilla theme as seen in the last movie, but chose not to because they didn't want to. They just didn't think it was good or didn't think it fit this character, and I don't think that... I think if you've already used it in the last film, it's too late now. You cannot put it back in the bottle. The genie's already out. You embrace it and move on, or you do something entirely different. Don't walk the line with a downright rip-off theme song, and that is what this is, a rip-off Godzilla theme. I consider it plagiarism. I think from an academic standpoint, you cannot prove me wrong. From a legal standpoint, maybe not. Maybe it's legally not plagiarism, but from an academic standpoint, I do think it is. Kong's motif is great. The one that, the Kong-Gia motif, the one that plays when he gets the axe, that's amazing. It's truly fantastic. Very similar to Mephi's theme song from the Godzilla Planet trilogy. Godzilla Anime trilogy has that Mephi's theme song, very similar in nature. And unfortunately, the Kong theme, which I did used to like, not as much as that Kong-Gia motif, but the Kong theme I did like, that is straight up note for note, note for note, to the tempo, plagiarized from a song from the 2019 live-action Lion King, which was riffing off of a song from the original Lion King soundtrack. I believe it's the song that plays when Simba dies, and if you listen to it, the Kong theme in its entirety plays in one iteration, straight up stolen from that. I was so disappointed to find that out because I do like the Kong theme. Setting the plagiarism aside, I think the soundtrack, it's mixed. Not all the music is great, but some of it is. One thing that is great is the visual effects. Visual effects are fantastic in this movie. I think they look amazing. Some of the best VFX of the entire Godzilla series. Some of those shots of Kong are the best he has ever looked before, and some of the best he ever will look, you know, in any of the movies that are currently out. Like, I think some of the VFX in Hong Kong are the best VFX in the entire Godzilla series overall. There's some CGI that I think is just truly groundbreaking and amazing. It's great. And the visuals overall are also great. Like the cinematography, the fight choreography, it's all fantastic. That is what this movie really excels at, is being a visual ride to enjoy. It really is great for that. And here's the thing. If you can tell, I've got a lot of issues with this movie. No shock, but you know why I like this movie as much as I do is because 10 out of 10 vibes. This movie is a 10 out of 10 in the vibe department. It is a good time. It is enjoyable. It's a very fast-paced, action-heavy, very light, adventurous movie. It's an enjoyable time. It's very fun. And when you can go along with it, and sometimes, most of the time, I can go along with it easily, it is just a great adventure film. It's fantastic. I love it. Right now, I'm kind of struggling, but that's because I'm analyzing it. But it's not always like that. Godzilla vs. Kong is pure entertainment, and it's just what I wanted and what the world needed back in 2021. It isn't 2021 anymore, and as much as I like Godzilla vs. Kong, I think the thing that broke me on it was, as I said, the fan base up at the top, and in many other ways, it's that GXK is too much. GXK doubles down on so many of the things I have issues with in this film while not fixing most of the problems I have here, that it's gotten me sick. And the best way I can explain my opinion on the MonsterVerse at the moment is through a food metaphor. So stick with me for just a second. If you made it this far, big thank you in the first place. Holy crap, this is the longest one I've ever done. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you. I think food is probably the best way I could explain my feelings on the MonsterVerse. Godzilla 2014 is a really nice appetizer. I really liked it, but it left me wanting a lot more. Kong Skull Island and Godzilla King of the Monsters came out, and they were both the main course, and I really loved it. I thought it was a fantastic meal. I would love to eat it again someday, and I was all on board with it. It was the best food at the time. And now we got Godzilla vs. Kong, which was the pure dessert. It was the dessert at the end of the meal, and it was a very rich and sugar-filled dessert. It left me with a bit of a bellyache, but I could ignore it because it was so delicious. And then we got a second dessert right afterward with Godzilla Kong and the New Empire, a movie that makes me, in retrospect, so sick to my stomach because it's so overfilling on the sugar and on the unhealthy aspects that it actually winds up souring my opinion of the first dessert, as now I look at both of them as being the thing that gave me a stomachache, when really I could have ignored the way I felt after the first one, and the second one is what amped up all of my problems and made me acutely aware of how much it affected me in the first place. If that metaphor makes sense, that is how I feel about the MonsterVerse. I don't always want to turn my brain off to enjoy a movie, and I don't think I should have to. So, from an entertainment factor, this movie is as strong as it possibly could be. When you analyze it, it falls apart. Maybe this is because King Kong vs. Godzilla from 1962 was my favorite movie of all time for many years of my life. Up until very, very recently, it was my favorite movie that had ever come out. I just loved it, seeing my two favorite characters of all time on screen together. And so maybe it's because I had 20 years to build up the rematch in my head, and I'm not sure it lived up to that. I know I'm not a screen time guy, like I really hate when people count screen time, but I'm gonna do that here for just a moment, and I'm gonna do it as fast as I possibly can to say, I think why I'm left wanting more after Godzilla vs. Kong, specifically in the combat department. Like, despite the fact that this movie delivers some of the greatest kaiju fighting and combat we have ever seen in a Godzilla film and in a Kong film, and it is better combat than we see in the 1962 film, hands down, better combat, I was left wanting more here than I am after watching the original movie, and I think it's summed up with the actual breakdown of these scenes. Now, this is subjective. People can count these things a little differently, but I'm gonna run through my runtime calculations here. The Tasman Sea scene, the action sequence, the Tasman Sea fight scene kicks off as Godzilla erupts from under the water and knocks Kong's transport ship upward, because other than that, it's Godzilla fighting the military transport. So that's when the fight actually begins. That sequence from there until when Godzilla leaves after defeating Kong is 6 minutes and 52 seconds. Pretty solid. Hong Kong round 1 starts with Kong surfacing and ends with Kong kind of dusting himself off as the victor of round 2. That round 2 and Hong Kong fight lasts for 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Pretty brief. That's pretty brief. It's half of the time of the Tasman Sea fight. Hong Kong round 2 is even quicker at 2 minutes and 30 seconds from Godzilla waking back up until Kong has officially been defeated by Godzilla. Only 2 minutes and 32 seconds, bringing us to a grand total of 13 minutes and 4 seconds of fight scenes between Godzilla and Kong in a 2-hour movie of Godzilla vs. Kong. But the combat is what kills it, because if you break down just when the characters are fighting, which means cutting out the human drama in the Tasman Sea, cutting out the human cutaways in Hong Kong, which I know there's not many, but there are a few, and cutting down on some of those other elements, like just when are they fighting, there is 2 minutes and 48 seconds of combat between Godzilla and Kong in the Tasman Sea. Hong Kong round 1, there is 2 minutes and 46 seconds of combat, about the same as there was in the Tasman Sea, except if you get rid of a bit of that chase scene, you know, like I said, we transition from a fight scene to a chase scene, there's only 2 minutes and 23 seconds of combat in Hong Kong round 1, and round 2 is even quicker at 1 minute and 30 seconds of combat before it's already over. This brings us to a total of 6 minutes and 26 seconds of combat in Godzilla vs. Kong, despite the fact that the movie itself is 2 hours long. For comparison, Godzilla Kong the New Empire delivers a 1 minute and 56 second fight scene in Egypt between Godzilla and Kong, and that's not what the movie is about, which means that Egypt fight is about as long as the 2 Hong Kong sequences. It's actually longer than Hong Kong round 2. How crazy. I understand that it has a chase scene there, but that's a much shorter chase. Meanwhile, King Kong vs. Godzilla, a shorter film coming in at an hour and a half, the scenes break down with round 1, Godzilla and Kong meeting at the hillside, lasting for 2 minutes and 40 40 seconds, round 2 being 10 minutes and 40 seconds, and that is the entire finale of the movie, and that's it. I mean, there is a kind of a break where Kong gets knocked out in round 2, if we're going to break it down that way. It is a little different, with the first part of round 2 lasting for 4 minutes and 41 seconds until Kong is knocked out, the second half picking up when he's resurrected. That lasts for 3 minutes and 5 seconds, which actually means the longest combat, those are the combat totals by the way, the longest combat we ever get in a Godzilla vs. Kong fight uninterrupted comes from round 2 in King Kong vs. Godzilla before Kong's knocked out at 4 minutes and 41 seconds of fighting. The grand total fight scenes for King Kong vs. Godzilla are 13 minutes 20 seconds. As far as scenes go, that's longer than Godzilla vs. Kong. With a shorter movie, with an hour and a half of runtime, we get 13 minutes 20 seconds of fighting. With 2 hours of runtime in Godzilla vs. Kong, we get 13 minutes and 4 seconds, so shorter. As far as combat goes, King Kong vs. Godzilla is a little different. The combat in round 1 is so brief, it's 49 seconds. That's where Kong's throwing the rocks at Godzilla and Godzilla's shooting him with the atomic breath. Round 2, however, lasts for 7 minutes and 46 seconds, meaning in both cases, King Kong vs. Godzilla features more combat between the title characters at 8 minutes and 36 seconds total. That comes in over the 6 minutes 26 seconds of Godzilla vs. Kong. Once again, the longest stretch of unbroken combat between the two characters is round 2 in King Kong vs. Godzilla, where it kicks off before Kong's knocked out with 4 minutes and 41 seconds. As somebody who gets frustrated when Godzilla fans complain about screen time, I do feel it's important to bring that up simply because we have waited since 1962 to see these two characters back on screen together, and the fight scenes last for about 2 minutes a pop, or at least the combat lasts for about 2.5 minutes per combat scene. The fight scenes last a little longer than that, especially that Tasman Sea scene. That's got a lot of drowning and jumping around involved. It's important for me to note that because I did leave the theater for the first time out of Godzilla vs. Kong wanting more, and it had nothing to do with Kong losing. I always expected Kong to lose. It was that I didn't think it fully delivered on the premise of Godzilla vs. Kong fighting as much as it could, and that's because, again, I think this movie lacked the confidence to just fully commit to those two as adversaries. They needed Mechagodzilla to be in there because they didn't think Godzilla and Kong fighting could be enough on its own. I'm even okay with the way Mechagodzilla shows up. I think the team up works well here. I think they did prove their point that this is a better way to do it than Batman versus Superman. That's all good and fine, but I am still left a little underwhelmed with the Godzilla versus Kong of it all. That aspect, the thing I'm here for, left me underwhelmed. It took me a couple viewings to really come around on this movie, and it took me accepting a lot of my script problems to get over those to appreciate what this film is. And I'm still able to do that most of the time, which is why I'm going to give Godzilla vs. Kong an 8 out of 10. I could give it a 7 out of 10. I could give it a 7 out of 10. And in fact, in my notes here, I have written 7.5 out of 10, just to show how conflicted I feel about it. On the whole, I think that this movie's strengths outclass its weaknesses by a lot. I do think that this movie is overall a great time. I do love watching this movie. I love watching it with other people. I think this is a very fun one. And I think this is one of the most accessible Godzilla films for youngsters. I think this is a great film to start on, and this absolutely would have been my favorite movie at the time if I was young enough when it came out. If I was the age I was the first time I got into Godzilla films when I saw this movie, this would have been my favorite movie ever made. I would have absolutely loved every second of it from start to finish, and I would have accepted all of the script problems as just being a part of the film. As I started to get older and understand them, I should mention, because I wouldn't have known them right away. I would have just accepted it as was at first. I still can put all of that aside, so I can give this movie as high of an 8 out of 10 because there is so much that I love about it. I do think it has flaws. I think it has a lot of them, and I think a lot of them need elaboration because I don't want to see them continue to be repeated in future movies. That's the main reason I spend so much time on my criticism, because I think it's important that other people understand why I have these feelings. First of all, because it's important for me to understand why I have them, and secondly, because I do think that there's value in understanding where people have issue with movies they like, and this is one that I like a lot. I like this movie a lot. Even though this review might not have seemed that way, I do like this movie a lot. 8 out of 10, I will say. But I don't want to see the mistakes of this film repeated, and unfortunately, they are in the next MonsterVerse movie, so I'm very, very curious how I'll feel about New Empire on a rewatch, as it's been about a year since I've watched it, so I shall wait and see when I get there. Until then, thank you for sticking with me for what I thought was going to be a short Godzilla-Thon when I started the notepad. process back a couple days ago, but what wound up being the longest Godzilla-Thon I've ever recorded. Thank you so much for sticking with me for this. I could not fathom this would be longer than King of the Monsters, but here we are. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons on Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons on Patreon that I'm able to continue to make videos like this in the first place for you. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. If that's not your thing, please consider joining as a channel member. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man, out.